All right, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, the Infinite Dragon here. Welcome back to Witch on the Holy Night. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching an archive stream, be sure to check me out live. Link is always in the description down below, as well as a link to my Discord, which will let you know what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, all of that good stuff. Where we last left off with Witch on the Holy Night, that is the wrong thing. We got past that creepy doll thing, and we did not kill Sojiro. But we did not escape the wrath of Alice, so we gotta get our boy through that. I don't know how we're gonna do that, but we can't just let him die after everything we've been through, right? Ill reading. Well, luckily for you, you wouldn't have to do any of it. If we killed Sojiro, then who would take care of Joker? It's not even spelled the same, right? It's Sojiro, not Sojiro. Those are completely different words. Bitch. So, this is completely unrelated. Jujutsu Kaisen: The Culling Game Part 1 is currently out. And I'm just watching it mostly for the animation stuff, because the animation in that anime is super good. But I got curious about a couple of characters, so I started reading the manga just to see what's going on. And minor spoiler, domain expansion, Restless Gambler. That's all I'll say on that. I'm excited to see that come into the anime. I'm so excited for that. Minor spoiler as opposed to an of-age spoiler. Listen, we are not doing Epstein's spoiler, all right? The melody stirred an emotion like nostalgia within them. Something once familiar but now lost to this world. They believed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it would play for all eternity. The opening stanza to Final Coda. It was mysterious siren's song, merry yet longing, that heralded a return from dreams to reality. The night shook. I like that little pendant thing. A song was spun. Now their lost paradise was unearthed. Abandoned dreams, forsaken idols. They all responded to the cry of the blue cat. The name of the bell was Diddle Diddle Banquet of the Night. That's not a good name. All fables made possible, all marvels made real, by the magecraft of Alice Kuonji, more magical than magic itself. Was it a bell?
随分と身勝手ね。それはあなた一人で決めていいことだったかしら、青子。
Is there baby oil included with this song? It's not a Diddy song. It's Hey Diddle Diddle the Cat and the Fiddle, and the icon thing, the little thing that she dropped was a cat fiddle. What did I miss with these few minutes? Not much. Alice sat perched atop of the clock tower like a black bird of ill omen. She smoothed the ruffles of her skirt as if she were preening.
Alice.
There was a tension in Aoko's voice as she lifted her head. The calm atmosphere from a moment prior had long since chewed away by Alice's gaze. Sojiro searched his hazy memory. He could not clearly make out her face at this distance, but he was sure he had seen her around town a number of times. I still wanting to go away from that puppet? Running away from the puppet? No. We destroyed the puppet at the end of last stream. We are not escaping Alice though, because Alice still needs Sojiro dead, even if even if Aoko spared him. Where and when eluded him, however, as the tension in the air kept him from connecting all the dots.
驚いた。随分と仲間思いになったのね、アリス。今夜は私に任せるんじゃなかったっけ?
Someone remade the OG Persona 3 box art with the reload renders. That's cool. Aoko readied her guard and took half a step forward, unconsciously. From an objective standpoint, it almost looked as though she were protecting the figure beside her. Alice's silence grew ever heavier. Her eyes, fixated on the ground below her, were devoid of emotion. An indescribable sense of dread and pressure laid claim over the plaza. If he strained his ears, he could make out the faint ringing of a bell echoing in the distance. The rippling sound wave seemed unbelievably... The rippling sound wave seemed, unbelievably, to be emanating from under the ground.
なあ、青崎、あの子。
黙ってて。
Sojiro stepped back, trying to stay out of the way. It was as though he had been told to go to hell. You were in the shower? Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure you didn't miss anything, because like this is one of those things where if you miss a little bit, it's kind of hard to catch up. With a crime for asking if the girl was Aoko's friend.
そうね。仲間思いに当てはまるかは微妙だけど、良くない予感がしたから様子を見に来ただけ。別にあなたの仕事を疑ったわけじゃないわ。
Imagine taking a shower, fake gamer.
それはどう
Now you gotta steal the bathwater.
どうせならもう少し早くその良くない予感とやらに気づいてほしかったけど。でもま、ご覧の通り自己解決したわ。夜も遅いし、さっさと帰っていいわよ、アリス。私の仕事っぷりを疑うわけじゃないんでしょ?
Their eyes locked on one another. Alice's stare was uncomfortably cold. Aoko's was bold, daring Alice to air her complaints.
いえ、気が変わったわ。せっかくだし二人で帰りましょう。その方があなたらしいわ。帰りしな、人形の話でも聞かせてちょうだい。
What the hell is this?
That's disgusting, and I'm not reading that out loud. The dude whose name I don't want to spell out just said on the side, like, what the fuck? Yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening. He doesn't know what's going on.
らしいって何よ、らしいって。いいから帰れ帰れ、ぐうたらアリス。部屋に閉じこもって役に立たないムクドリでも作ってろっての。
A disappointed sigh escaped Alice's delicate lips. It seemed that the black-clad girl was more astonished than angry.
青子、口にしたくないけど、本気?
Quietly, Alice questioned her roommate of nearly 2 years.
呆れた。二人で秘密を守ると言ったのに。まだ半端にそっち側なの？それとも情でも移った？別に情っていうより私の気分よ。だいたい方針なんてその場その場で変わるもんでしょ。気分ならなおさらよ。そっちこそ一度した約束は絶対守るなんて時代遅れなんじゃない？
The proverbial knives were out now. No quarter was given nor taken. Sadly, their partnership was one of convenience and had not reached the level of mutual understanding. Their version of friendship was both delicate and unique. When a conflict of opinion arose, each would refuse to budge until the other crumbled. Neither was concerned for the other's plight, and at least for now, that was how they liked it.
そうね。今の暴言はあなたらしいとは思うけど。
Once again, she let out a sigh, even larger than the one before.
言い争いは後にしましょう。そこの彼をいなかったことにするのは。
Oops. Finally, she struck straight to the point. As As if making to move a chess piece, Alice lifted her slender finger. Stop using the word slender. A fork? Even this simple action seemed mysterious to Sojiro, the same boy who had been hunted by his classmate Aoko Aozaki and borne witness to an automaton. Aoko's violence... I can't take this seriously anymore. This is a comically large fork. I mean, I've seen too much of this series to just not take that seriously. Aoko's violence and an animated doll. And an animated doll. Though perhaps far beyond the realm of logic, both these things were derived from reality. As surprised as he had been, there's no need to think of them as total mysteries. However, when the thing approached out of thin air, from a seemingly unrelated gesture, he had no word for it besides mysterious. Sojiro stood motionless, captivated by the stage performer's magic trick, as the girl's single-finger magecraft turned into an attack directed at him. A blue light flew from the side to repel it, annihilating it without a trace.
Yaba.
Aoko immediately regretted her reflexive shot.
どういうこと？約束を曲げただけじゃなく、ルールまで破るつもり？
The already chilled midwinter air plunged below freezing. Alex looked calm and collected on the outside, but in reality she was sometimes even more hot-blooded than Aoko. This was especially true when it concerned her familiars. The fork was a familiar? Accidentally breaking one would often result in a week of silent treatment. But against someone who maliciously destroyed her things, Alice was prone to retaliate without warning.
あっちゃー、いつかやるとは思ったけど、ついに逆鱗に触れちゃったか。
It was not a familiar, it was the thing that she just threw at him. It also may not have been a comically large fork, it just looked that way from perspective. Now tell me her familiars are just kitchenware? No, you saw the blue bird. The blue bird was also familiar. Aoko sighed at herself. Even she was exasperated by her own stupidity, yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of relief. She did not intend to make any excuses, and she had no regrets. If she had broken the rules, then so had Alice.
青子。なんていうか。
If anything, this took a load off her mind. After all, now there was no going back. Aoko never... The bird is just a weapon from Soul Eater. It turns into a spoon. That's a weird death size they turned into. Aoko never intended to break her own rules. If there was anything for Aoko to regret, it was putting too little power into her shot.
私的に今夜こいつに死なれるのは困るのよ。 なんで日を改めて殺しに来てくれないアリス。いいでしょ？たった1日ぐらい。
Aoko is simply natural to take on a pro bono case in defense of an innocent suspect.
それは市場。悪い？一宿一般の恩義って割と大事にしてるの、私。私との協定より。ええ、時と場合によっては。
Soshiro's human rights had not yet entered the argument. The girls were busy pouring oil on each other's flames. The girl clad in black was the first to move, or rather to erupt.
そう。よくわかったわ、青子。私は彼をここで殺す。あなたは彼をここだけ生かす。つまり、私と戦う。
Fuck, they talk so slow.
いいわけないじゃない。
So far, I've seen 4 types of weapons in Soul Eater: scythe, sword, gun, and whatever the fuck Black Star's got. Also a knife. Black Star has several weapons. It's a chain and sickle. Minor spoilers for Soul Eater, I guess. A sword, a shuriken, And there's one other thing that I can't think of. I'm now on another weird algorithm of Twitter again. It involves Naoto and some white green witch hair feminine character and red horn, assuming it's from One Piece. I don't know which character you're talking about. What character is he talking about? Elko bit back the retort. She was very familiar with Alice's magecraft and knew painfully well how many mystics were hidden in Alice's tiny body. Is it hard for you to remember chain and sickle? It's like a scythe. The sickle is a scythe. He just has two attached to it like nunchucks. The odds of victory were essentially non-existent. And once the first shot had been fired, Alice Kalonji was without mercy. Whether facing a roommate or a friend, a most beloved familiar member or a stranger, once Alice began to fight as a witch, she became a heartless, unflappable monster. Alko advanced another half step forward as if to encourage herself. It was too late to back down now. The situation was no longer a trivial quarrel over a witness. The bedrock of their so-called friendship had nothing to do with their individual abilities and everything to do with being equals in will. That is why, in order to stay true to herself, Olga had no room for compromise or deception.
もちろん、あんたを殺すことになっても、そこのバカは生かしきるわ。それに。
Her magic circuits howled as they kicked into gear. Her body, which had mostly been dormant during the battle with the puppet, ignited, preparing to demonstrate its true worth.
それに、どの道最後には殺し合う仲でしょ、私たち。
Her courage overpowered any fear she had for her opponent. Turning her body, her magic circuits to become like the barrel of a gun, Elko fired a magic bullet. It was exceedingly basic magecraft formula. There was no nature interference, no creating of the wind, parting of water, nor hastening of decay. It was simply the process of converting the imaginary activity known as magical energy into something real before releasing it as heat. Thus, Elko's destructive power was equal to her supply of magical energy. The magic bullets she had used against Sojiro were amongst the most basic single-action magecraft that did not require an incantation. At her present ability, Elko's main mode of attack, her magic bullet, could be fired at 3 levels of power. These were at the 2nd level. This required a double-action magecraft, a casting through activation of her crest combined with a simplified incantation. Good base. However, Naoto and Yamato? Why are they comparing Naoto and— oh, I understand. Because they both present male. I don't understand why— like, I feel like people don't understand the point of Naoto's character. Like, the point of Naoto's character is that she is forced to present male despite the fact that she feels feminine. It's not portrayed very well in the game, but that's the point of her character. The point of Naoto's character is that she needs to present male in order to be taken seriously in a male-dominated society. Yamato just decided that they are male. That's very different from Naoto. Without blinking, Alice dispersed the shot that Alko had mustered all of her spirit to fire. She's not trans, she just doesn't want to get discriminated against in the police force. Yeah. Now, I'll admit that it's not portrayed very well, and you can probably make a lot of subtext to point out that Naoto is trans, and I'm not saying that subtext isn't there. But the original point of the story is that Naoto is in a male-dominated society and feels like they have to present male in order to be taken seriously. Everybody quote tweeting is just saying just read. I'm gonna look at this thing. Can't believe that both of us are poorly written jokes about trans people. First off, Naoto, that doesn't make any fucking sense. It's not a joke about trans people. It's a joke of, it's not even a joke. It's a fucking commentary about how men dominate society. And I would actually argue that Yamato doesn't have anything to do with being trans. It's and everything to do with being who you want to be and being the person that you want to be. I mean, technically you could read that as trans, so I guess Yamato has an issue, or has not an issue, but like talks about it technically in trans politics. But like, it's not a joke. People are just doing shit for no reason. Aoko tutted in frustration. A swift sneak attack that used a simplified incantation would not be enough to break Alice's guard.
相変わらずお堅いこと。そのから一段と独りよがりになってるんじゃない？
Aoko provoked Alice in order to disguise her own lack of composure. Somehow, Alice seemed delighted by Aoko's bravado.
売り言葉に買い言葉というやつね。こういう勢いだけのきっかけは初めてだけど。
People on the internet having media literacy challenge impossible, basically. Like, Yamato isn't trans because they decided that they're male. Yamato is technically trans because they want to be Oden. And I'd argue that has less to do with gender politics and more following your dream.
驚いたわ。こんなくだらない理由でもその気になるものなのね、人間って。
And to be fair, Oden is based. Alice giggled. Smiling with heartfelt amazement, Alice gestured her left hand toward the earth. Oh, look, a lot of fucking kitchenware. Countless utensils shot out from underneath the cobblestone paving the plaza.
しずきくん、後ろに飛んで。
She grabbed his hand as she shouted, jumping backwards before he even had a chance to respond. As if they had wills of their own, the utensils had suddenly appeared from the ground. I read that wrong. Utensils that had suddenly appeared from the ground gave chase. As the barriers of spears grew around them, Aoko and Sojiro put some distance between themselves at the clock tower.
これで終わり？
Just under 30 feet stood between them and Alice. The lethal weapons that had crumbled from the stone beneath them fell short of what Aoko had anticipated. They now encircled the clock tower, making the scene look like a burning of a witch at the stake.
普通逆じゃない。ここは私たちを逃がさないよう槍で周りを囲むものでしょ。
I'll laugh if she throws the kitchen sink. I think she comes based if she throws the kitchen sink. The path behind them was safe. If they wanted, they could try to make a break for the main gate and escape.
いいのアリス。悪いけど逃げられるなら逃げるわよ。私。
If she could just make it back to town, it would be Aoko's win. All she wanted to do was let Sojiro get away for the night, so if she can get him back to the city, it would be, for the most part, mission accomplished.
Huh?
Or so she had thought. Without even offering a glance at her targets below, Alice carefully and lovingly pulled out a bottle from her pocket.
緑のフラスコ？あれって確か。やば！とにかくファイヤー！
Her shot was deflected with ease. Gone was Aoko's earlier bravado. It was only natural. Aoko had indeed grown as a mage. Over the last 2 years of study, her studies had progressed well, and she more or less gotten the grasp of her roommate's tendencies and abilities. Oh, that's terrifying. I love that though. Look at that. That's fucking scary. This had made her conceited enough to believe that under favorable circumstances, she be able to show Alice a thing or two in a fight. Alice uncorked the magic bottle. A gentle breeze caressed her cheek. Yes, Alice, we see the fit. Diddle Diddle flew as a new player stepped onto the stage. But from where would it enter? The sound of footsteps, a nostalgic parade approached. What emerged was a miracle that Oko Ozaki, an apprentice mage, had never witnessed. The dead came to life. Okay, so the reason why her magic, her magecraft is kitchen utensils is because her character in and of itself is a reference to Alice in Wonderland. The dead came to life. The inanimate awakened. The woods were enveloped by the mists. Fire-breathing lizards lurked in the swamps. Puppets made merry at midnight. Alice Koonji's slender had transfigured the entirety of the park as if gently stroking the back of an elderly cat.
いいわ。ごっこ遊びをしましょう。青子。
For one night, the wasteland of dashed hopes and dreams was restored to its former glory. He was an immortal monster ready to devour reality. That's even more creepy. So I don't know if you guys can see it from stream side, but she has her own eyes and there is a third eye above her left eye that is just howling blue. Summon the Queen of Hearts in attack mode. Weez, remember that you said that, because Yugi does play some cards like that. He was an immortal monster ready to devour reality. A dark fairy tale that, once unleashed, would never let its prey escape.
逃げられるものなら逃げてみせて。どこまで行けるかわからないけど、この夜を越えることができたのなら、あなたの勝ちにしてあげる。
Her declaration marked the start of a desperate battle. The witch in black laughed at her friend. Her musical mirth filled with affection, sadness, and innocent delight. Faded glory returned to Kitsyland. The neon glow of innumerable lights illuminated the night. Can we talk about how I said that without stuttering at once? Come on, bro. I killed that. Speakers filled the air with the sound of vinyl music. Merry-go-rounds, small and large, whirled round and round. All in all, it made for a mind-boggling spectacle. It was certainly possible to power the facilities by transmuting magical energy into electricity via alchemy. That said, I don't get it where they all in a stalemate until she decided to Were they in a stalemate until she decided to write fine? Alright, fine, something else? Yes? What don't you get? I'm confused at what you don't understand. They probably were at a stalemate and all Aoko had to do was leave and get to the city, to which Alice said, "You're not leaving this area." Because the entire area is now her domain. You can't leave this facility. She's control of everything in here. Music is fire, by the way. This is a waste of time. Just kill him already. It's not that simple, Batra. That's why it's not that's why it's taking so much longer. Because in order to kill him, she now has to kill Aoko, and Aoko is not just some regular human. So I'm confused on what you mean. This is a waste of time. Weird for me to continue. What do you mean it's weird? It makes perfect sense. If Aoko thought that they were on an even playing field, domain expansion Alice in Wonderland, basically, but Batra hasn't seen Jujutsu Kaisen, so it doesn't make sense. Aoko has decided that she's going to protect this kid, at least for the night. Alice came in and was like, I'll kill him. And Aoko stopped him. And if they're on even match, Alice has to get the upper hand in the playing field. So she basically took control of the park. Well, I don't understand what you're not understanding. This is basically Alice going Super Saiyan, and if you wanted to put it into other anime terms or whatnot. I was hoping for something more spectacular. You don't think taking control of a whole entire amusement park that's been abandoned for 15 years is not spectacular? I don't know, man. I like it. Simply supplying the park with electricity would not have brought back to life that which was broken. The young woman did this not by mixing chemicals into a compound, but by melting down divine providence into a witch's brew.
まずいわね。アリスのプロイは何個か見てきたけど、今回のは桁が違う。セット。
Stifling her anxiety, Aoko fired the crest on her right arm. If magic circuits were a mage's engine, then their crest was software that assisted their magecraft. For the fledgling mage Aoko, this was her trump card. All she had to do was supply magical energy to the crest-based formula. It may not have been the strongest magecraft, but it was hers, proof that she was successor of the Aozaki lineage.
講師2層、直流数も。
I still think her, like, the game is telling me that it's simple magecraft, but the fact that her magical energy is a gun is fucking sick. The pattern of her crest shifted to execute the formula, which connected to her magical circuits. The process resembling trains changing rails, a puzzle involving dozens of circuits. She constructed it as swiftly as possible without sacrificing the quality of its construction. Instant magecraft cast with an incantation would not be enough to reach Alice Koonji. Aoko had gauged the strength of Alice's defense with her initial shots. She would dial up the power 5 times the next time, driving 20 tons of force into her target. Alice had the protection of a thick hanging fog and the dense barrier around her. However, this attack would be more than enough to pierce through both. If Aoko struck home, it could cave in Alice's chest and end the fight. At worst, it would at least knock Alice down from her position atop the clock tower.
そろそろいいかな。
Sojiro, now's not the time, dog. As always, there was one guy who had spoiled the deadly tension, pulling Aoko out of her killer mode. Sojiro had been looking back and forth between Aoko and Alice in confusion.
それでどういう話になったんだ?
He said it like he might ask for directions to the train station. Normally, she would have lashed out in response, but his deadly serious tone shocked rather than angered her.
信じられない。慣れてきた。
Aoko swallowed back a sigh and returned her focus to activating her crest.
交渉は決裂。ちょっと怒らせすぎた。あの子から見れば、まあいい機会だし、遊園地ごと私を亡き者にしようって腹ね。
Sojiro tilted his head as if begging for a simpler explanation.
私、割とあの子に恨まれてる。
Hello, life.
捕まったが最後、どんな風に殺されるか想像すらできないわ。要するに、あんたも私もあの子をどうにかしないと生きて帰れないってことよ。
Life, do you play visual novels? I feel like you'd enjoy them.
そんなとばっちりだ。
To be fair, you put yourself in the coral on accident.
まあ、そういうことになるかもね。
You love VNs? For sure, for sure. As Sojiro protested in a tone wholly inappropriate to the situation, Aoko let another blast rip from her right arm. She was then aiming at Sojiro though. A little earlier in the day, and Aoko would have been happy to do exactly that, but now her attention was focused on the girl in black atop the clock tower. Why? Because we're playing one, that's why I asked. Aoko's mind struggled to catch up to her astonishment. She had fired the strongest, fastest magic bullet she had the ability to conjure, and Alice blocked it. Not much was to be expected. When Alice set her mind to defending herself, such an attack was child's play. But what just happened? Something Alco had never seen before leapt to Alice's defense. A team of horses? A plague of locusts? No. Those existed in the real world, unlike what Alice had just witnessed. Alco, sorry. Normal creatures would not form like a spontaneous cloud or fog and then dissipate just as quickly into the night sky. Impossible things moved in impossible ways. Alice was not even supplying them with any power source. Those things never needed power in the first place. Those broken and discarded things did not follow the rules of mankind. No, so like you made the joke domain expansion, but that's basically what's happening right now. This is just a domain expansion Alice in Wonderland. This was an invasion of fairy tales. Motherfucker said stand power, Bohemian Rhapsody. Alice just has a car battery extractor. There's my dread. There it is. Compared to them, the automaton looked merciful. Autonomous puppets were products of magecraft, but I'm reading too fast. Autonomous puppets were products of magecraft, but even they would behave as puppets should. These newly animated things, however, were nothing of the sort. Empty vessels became living creatures. Dummies warped into malformed beings. There was a fog so dense with magical energy it visibly spread to all corners of the park, bringing with it a monstrous welcoming party that easily numbered over 1,000. Ow, my eyes. Sputtering by the shuddering sensation running down her spine, Alco fired a barrage of single-action magic bullets. The fact that you could say the term single-action magic bullets is fucking sick. Oh my god. Okay, did her bullets turn into fucking balloons? Her impulsive attack scattered futilely. The Knights of the Merry-Go-Round soared into the night sky. Green fire-breathing lizards flocked. The bakeries opened their doors once again, and human-sized loaves of fresh bread marched from their ovens as platoons of newly baked soldiers.
Aozaki, uchiro!
Aoko and Soji were completely surrendered. Who gave her the reality stone? Right, what the fuck is happening? The Ferris wheel creaked as it gently turned. A rickety train car raced about the roller coaster tracks with Kitsy, tears streaming down its face aboard. It was a grossly twisted fantasy. The girl in black reigned over the insanity-fueled park. Oh, now we're screwed. Alco was transfixed by the scene unfolding around her. Then she realized what was happening. It's a reality marble? Alice had once told her of Meinster's familiars. Among them were 3 of particular notoriety, one of which she recalled being capable of something similar to this, and it was called
Aozaki, だから後ろ!
Struck by Oko's bullets, the creature exploded into splinters. It was clear Oko's shots were becoming more powerful, but it was also this case that these beings were less robust than your average automata. Aoko turned away from the clock tower, grabbed his hand, and began to run.
Aozaki!
ごめん、これ無理。逃げるわよ。
逃げるってどこに？
どこって、とにかく行けるところまで。
She shouted as though trying to persuade herself as she valiantly cleared a path. Aoko's mage bullets flew like a scream, blowing away the creatures that blocked or simply gathered around their path. She made a hole for them to escape through. Man, all of this on a school night. Magical bullets exploded like blue fireworks. Aoko and Sojiro ran down the bumpy brick road. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle, went far beyond mutual convenience. They headed for the park's exit at full speed without exchanging a word or look. The radius only extended as far as the park border, so they would be safe as long as they made it outside. But, speaking in pure numbers, the difference in strength was 2 versus an army. Or rather, 1 versus an army. Sojiro was hardly useful in the situation, and manpower wasn't exactly the issue here, since they were facing puppets.
さっきの大丈夫？上からこうでっかいハサミが落ちてきたけど。
Aoko shuddered as she blasted away the monsters that stood in their path. There was no time to stop for breath or even look back.
なんとかギリギリ。
As Sojiro pursued, his voice too had naturally become shrill. 5 minutes earlier. Imagine if she failed to kill him for whatever reason and she didn't want to spare him. Imagine going to school the next day with her. Imagine like shit didn't just like we didn't just catch a body the day before. They had broken into the siege at the plaza surprisingly fast. It seemed that the residents were waiting different cases by case, with larger creatures taking additional time.
ラッキー、朝に弱いタイプばっかと見た。
Aoko joked as she mowed down the small fry that popped up. But then, without warning, something outrageous extended its way down from above them. Actually, you know what, Weez? You made the joke. That's totally the title for this part. Domain expansion, Alice in Wonderland. I'm a comedy genius. You actually do have some pretty good jokes. It was the claws of a 60-foot lobster adorning the roof of seafood restaurant. Its pincers were like a guillotine. You guys say guillotine or guillotine? Guillotine feels better to me to say. As Aoko and Sojiro cut across the front of the restaurant, the Red King pressed in at tremendous speed, keen on splitting them in each in two. The gate was just on the other side of the restaurant, but they had to take the long way around in order to lose the giant lobster snapping at their heels. Waiting along their detour had been a horde of monsters too many to count.
なんとかギリギリ。
The first way is the correct way to say guillotine, the second way is to make fun of the French. So if you say guillotine, you're making fun of the French. Sojiro called out in response, recalling just how narrowly he had avoided his head being severed clean from his body.
手前。うわ、なんだあれ。焼きたてか。
そうみたいね。要するに下級兵士よ。
Aoko halted her sprint and set her crest full into operation.
7、6、5メートル。あの程度ならスナップだけで事足りる。
Sliding along the brick path, she brandished her right arm. She loosed a shower of magical bullets. Snap was a single action spell that favored rate of fire over power and mowed down the monsters with satisfying pops.
青崎そっちも。
了解。
Listen, it may be a simple spell, but it's sick as fuck. Blue explosions bloomed along the lamp-lit promenade. Promenade? Aoko's curtains of fire fanned out. It was a marvelous Starmine fireworks show. Starmine? Starmine. Starmine. The toy-bred men turned to charcoal.
いける。数でこそ押されてるけど、この状態が続くなら逃げ切れる。しずきくん、そっちは？
いない、空いてる。ここからなら入り口の東側に出られるはずだ。
With a magical barrage that would leave an average spellcaster blue in the face, the novice mage broke through the siege. Meanwhile, a single bird keenly watching everything unfold. The moment the blue bird descended into its master's field of vision, it made its high-pitched call. The girl listened The girl listened expressionlessly to the
構わ
report.
ないわ。予想通りよ。撃つこと、壊すことしか脳がなくても、青子の魔力の使い方は波じゃないから。
The robin flapped its wings as it tweeted in response. That's still not a robin. Perhaps it was criticizing Alice for complimenting Aoko. Or perhaps it was jealous of Aoko being praised by Alice. Alice could barely make sense of its chirping rant. Aoko Ozaki was a novice mage. Until just 2 years ago, she had grown up with no background in magecraft. Compared to Alice, who was raised as a witch from birth, Aoko possessed far less talent and experience. Maybe it's Robin from DC. How did he become a bird then? There was simply no comparison to be made. In a contest of skills in magecraft, 10 times out of 10, Alice would be declared the victor. However, the narrative, it's a Nightwing. However, the narrative changed when it came to the battle for life or death. Alice Kuonji was not the type of mage suited for combat, while Oko Ozaki, on the other hand, was built for it. In a contest that pitted magical energy against magical energy, even Alice would concede that Oko had the upper hand. Aoko's manipulation of magical energy was extraordinary. The scale of her magic circuits was smaller than that of Alice, but their rotational speed, durability, and output quality, not to mention efficiency, were otherworldly. That was Aoko Ozaki's hallmark. Though she had many failings when handling sophisticated formula, in just 2 years of practice, Aoko had surpassed Alice in simple formula that merely required an energy input. She also had genius instincts and adaptability. Though Aoko was not particularly proficient at executing magecraft, she was terrifyingly fast. If she had been born outside the Ozaki clan, she would have doubtless risen to fame as a competitive sharpshooter.
でも、残念ね。
In a straight shootout, Alice did not stand a chance. Alice Kuonji had never bothered to learn primitive magecraft like magic bullets in the first place. She was a classic puppeteer. Her familiars served as her arms and legs to carry out all the particulars of battle.
制限時間には気づいているわよね、青子。魔力はいくらでも貸してあげるけど、あなたの魔弾はあと半時で値崩れするわ。
In about an hour, she'll win? Chirping as if in agreement, the robin took flight. It had been nearly 10 minutes since Alice made the amusement park into her dominion. To what the green fog would give birth next. Aoko and Sujiro, still running about, would soon come to understand the gravity of their situation.
しずきくん、正門ってこっち？
ああ、その店を曲がれば出口だ。
Running non-stop at full speed had them at their limits. Their breath ragged, the duo rounded a corner at breakneck pace. Amusement park though it was, this was still the infamous Kitsyland. It would have taken a high school student 20 minutes to sprint to the entire circumference. It would have taken a high school student 20 minutes to sprint the entire circumference of the park. And though they were now intimately familiar with the park's geography, look at Sujiro's face. He was changing beyond recognition. The transformation was not limited to the park's residents either.
大崎、
何を？
言いたくないんだけど、この遊園地広くなってないか？
It was. Their problem wasn't as mundane as mistaking the location of the exits nor the strange terrain. No, the park was warping and twisting in upon itself. Even as they ran, its structure was expanding and growing like that of a living creature. Soon, the pair noticed that the mob encircling them had grown even stronger. Entrusting her back to Sojiro, Aoko summoned all of her effort just to keep from whining. No more blame Sojiro for cowering in shock, but for Aoko to do the same, she bore responsibility for causing and dragging him into this mess. She could not afford to succumb to panic.
大丈夫。落ち着け私。遊園地の果てはある。遠いけど、鉄柵はちゃんと見える。フラットスナークだって制限なしってわけじゃない。 外に逃げるって選択は正しいはず。現状外までは目算で1キロぐらいだけど。
Up until now, they had been too concerned with simply running. Their breathing had become labored. If they had to run another mile without rest, they'd end up collapsing along the way.
青崎、体大丈夫か？
The whisper from behind pulled Aoko back to reality.
大丈夫だけど、ちょっと一息入れたいわね。
賛成。ここから休みなしで外周まで走るのはやめた方がいい。
驚いた。しずきくんも外まで走ろう派とは。
She let slip a giggle. Far from debilitated by panic, her comrade in arms had been analyzing the situation and forming an escape plan.
ちょっとだけ建物に逃げ込むのは。
気は進まないけど、それしかないわね。
The breadmen had them completely surrounded. Perhaps this might have been a problem for an average person, but for Aoko, breaking through their formation to get to the building would be a cinch. The issue was...
問題はどんな店を選ぶかってこと。
She considered the characteristics of the transforming park. What would pose a danger and what was safe. The most important factor was not the strength or the complexity of the building.
そうだ。選ぶならあの単純さで正しいはず。
I would go for the one that has the least amount of stuff in it because she's gonna bring that stuff to life and you have to fight it, right? So...
しずきくん、あっち。
After routing the monsters, Oko hopped behind the counter, soon followed by Sujiro.
カウンターに隠れてて。
Like she was in a western shootout, Elka squared off against the monsters using the counter as a cover. You can't tell me that's not sick, chat.
ビンゴ。ここならスナーク化しないんだ。
After assessing the current state of the enemy, Elko sat down under the counter.
あいつらは。
店の周りで地団打踏んでるわ。理由があってね。あいつらはここには入ってこられないのよ。
Elko gave the perplexed Sojiro a grin and took a moment to catch her breath. She heaved a heavy sigh of relief and fatigue.
とりあえずコーヒーブレイクね。ここは遊園地の中でも遊びのない場所だから、あいつらにとっては鬼門なのよ。
It's always weird to me that when localization teams do localization and like the Japanese very clearly says something in English like she just did, they never used whatever they said in English. Like she very clearly said the words coffee break, but they don't ever put that in the
調
localization.
理器具も最近のものだし、擬人化されたマスコットもないし、スナーク化するにはちょい文明圏すぎるってこと。
スナーク。
あいつらの名前よ。つけたのは私じゃなくてアリスなのかしらね。あの子の性格的にちょっと想像できないけど、まあとにかくそういう名前。
Perhaps now at ease from knowing they were safe, Sojiro seemed enthralled in her explanation. Aoko could not help but chuckle as Sojiro nodded sagely. It was certain that he had no idea what she was talking about. Normally this would have irritated her, but this time she was grateful for the warmth of his strange sobriety.
それはともかく調子良さそうだな、青崎。
Mistaking her smile for composure, Sojiro broke into a smile himself. It was just another link in the chain of misunderstandings, but there was no need to redress it.
あれ？あなたから見てもわかる？私のマダンの威力が上がっているの。
そりゃミラーハウスで散々追いかけ回されたからな。あの時と同じ動作なのに物騒さが増していれば嫌でもわかる。でもいいのか？確か数に限りがあるとか言ってただろう。もう随分撃っちまったけど。
He's definitely fired more than 20 or 30.
あんた、時々あれよね。
ん？
Her opinion of him has improved just a little bit.
なんでもない。私のマダンの威力が上がっているのは単純に魔力の濃度の問題。さっきから霧がかかってるでしょ？あれ、全部魔力なのよ。弾を撃つための燃料と思って。
Magical energy was divided into two broad categories. First was odd, produced inside the mage's body. Second was mana, which filled the atmosphere. This is the same as what happens in Fate, but the re-explanation is nice. At the moment, the amusement park had turned into a fairy tale land overflowing with mana. Although it meant nothing to the average person, to a mage it was a paradise where spells could be cast as much as one pleased.
じゃあ残り魔力とやらは気にしなくていいのか。注意すべきは怪我と体力だけ。
まあ個人的な責任においてはその限りね。
Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief. From Sojiro's perspective, more so than the monster she mowed down, Aoka was the biggest bully on the playground. He had been concerned about what would happen should her magical energy be exhausted, but luckily for him, she was far from surrendering her crown.
頼りにしてくれるのは嬉しいけど、ぬか喜びよ。あんな雑魚たち、ただ動いているだけのガラクタなんだから。スナーク本体は当然として、アリスが他の童話の怪物を出してきたら、私じゃどうにもならない。
他の童話の怪物。遊園地をこんな風に変えたやつ以外にまだいるのか？
そう。プロイキッシャーって名付けられた、私たちでさえ目を背けたくなる反則。不可能な夢物語をも再現する時代に取り残されたデタラメよ。
Sojiro's expression seemed to be calling her out on the hypocrisy.
あのね、私たちはちゃんと現代に寄り添った魔術師よ。できないこともあるし、当たり前のことだけど、近代兵器にはかなわない。20世紀、まあいろんな戦争の後押しで兵器の進化は私たちを超えちゃったから。けどあの子のは違う。どんなに人間の技術が進歩しようと関係ないって怪物なの。例えばあのブレッドマンいるでしょ。
I don't know why, but I love this expression. This expression that she does is really funny to me. I love it. I might actually steal this from one of my drawings at some point.
あいつには自動拳銃とか効かないわよ。多分意味が分かっていないから。
Alco casually gestured outside past the counter.
アリスの使い魔は全てが空想によってこねられた神秘なの。前提からしてありえないことだから、通常の物理法則と折り合いが悪い。空想と現実は両立しないっていうごく当たり前の理由でね。
なるほど。ブレッドマンってのはあの動く焼きたてパンのことなんだな。
Sojiro seemed to have ignored the majority of Aoko's explanation and only reacted to the part that caught his curiosity.
話を戻すけど、あいつらと近代兵器の相性は最悪。ロケット弾でも効果はないわ。意思の疎通、秩序の共有ができてないから。プロイキッシャーにとって彼らの世界には存在しないもの、意味がわからないものは触れることなく無産する。
So basically we're working with cartoon logic.
彼らに通じるのは同じ神秘を帯びた魔力だけっていうデタラメぶりよ。もう完全に概念空間っていうか概念宇宙っていうか。要するにあいつらは伝承防御っていう特別なルールを持っていて、単純に強い力、強い魔術じゃ効果は薄いの。
Yeah, we're
元
working
に
with
なった
cartoon
童話に
logic.
ちなんだ欠点をつかないと倒せない。
She's basically saying that the only thing that works against those things is cartoon logic because they function on cartoon logic. We're fighting Bugs Bunny. Do you guys see why I like this trope a lot? I fucking love this. Alice is based.
ギリシャ神話のアキレスあたり分かりやすい例えなんだけど、知ってる？
Sojiro shook his head.
そう。無事帰れたら飛び丸あたりに教えてもらって。定番だけどいい話よ、あれ。
Sojiro was feeling pretty lost, but he did his best to grasp the situation. He thought that ploy kickshaws were scary enough to chase Aoka and that puppet from before out of the house barefoot. Certainly the scene before them was stuff of nightmares. But Sojiro had a different way of thinking.
やっぱり青崎の方が怖くないか？
あんた死ぬの？
Sojiro waved in protest, suddenly pointing out that she had made his case for him.
あのね、今私たちを取り囲んでるのはおまけに過ぎないの。 アリスにとってあのブレッドマンもロブスターもソーセージ屋のミンチマシーンも全部が全部私が打ってるマダンより価値がない。いい？あの動くマスコットたちはね、ただのおまけなの。アリスが解放した童話の怪物の一呼吸みたいなものなのよ。
Okay, so what she's saying is that she's building up to something, which we already knew because Alice kind of already said that.
呼吸ってこれが？
私だって考えたくないわよ。でもそれが現状。たった一体の童話の怪物だけで私たちは手一杯。そういうわけだからアリスがあと一体でも追加したら諦めて。
追加ってこれに制限はないのか？
あの子が出し惜しみしなければまだ何体かストックはあるでしょうけど、まあ成立する条件はあるわね。例えば川がないと目を覚まさない怪物もいる。この遊園地噴水はあるけど川はないでしょ。元になった童話縛りなの、あの子の使い魔は。
Okay, so the conditions in order to summon fairy tales is that they have to be around certain parts of the fairy tale in order to be summoned. I guess that makes sense.
童話ってかけそばとか？
ここに川がないのは不幸中の幸いね。もしあったらもっと直接制圧に向いたやつが出てきてた。
I could continue completely ignoring Sujiro. I don't know what he was
話の
referring
続きだ
to.
けど、
Obviously, we're talking about Western fairy tales.
アリスの魔術の基本はマザーグースって知らないか。イギリスの歌で遊び心に富んだメルヘンチックな内容よ。ただそっち系のプロイキッシャーは怖くないの。みんなそれなりになんとか魔術にも落とし込める範囲だから。
聞きたくないんだけど、そっち系じゃないのは？
マザーグースを下地にしたとある創作童話系。あの子のお母さんが好きでね。こっち系のはどいつもこいつも尋常じゃない。私たちから見ても勘弁してって言いたくなるわ。でこの遊園地を生き返らせたのはこっち系よ。多分フラットスナークってやつだと思う。私も聞き流していたから詳しくはわからないけど。
Why would you not pay attention to that? Like, you knew at some point that you were gonna fight her, so if she was explaining it to you, you would think that you would have to pay attention to that, right? Like, I don't know. That might have been a misstep on her part. Sojiro swallowed, the discomfort making its way up to his throat. He really wanted her to explain things a little less vaguely, but something she had just said necessitated further investigation.
待て青崎、あの子の話を聞き流したってなんで？
いや説明してもらったのは随分と前だし、あの頃はアリスの話あんまり信じられなかったのよね。
No, well, I mean, I guess she just became a mage recently, so that's fair.
私が素人だと思って大げさに自分の魔術を語ってくれてるな、舐められてるなとか。
In truth, if anyone hadn't taken the lesson seriously, it was Aoko. She will learn that lesson firsthand soon enough when she experienced just how real Alice's monsters were. She'd also discover how heretical the Minster witches truly were in the world of magecraft.
その聞き流した内容は？
何でも強力な結界を張るプロイだって。アリスが受け継いだプロイは山ほどあるけど、その中でもえりすぐりの一つよ。捨てられたもの、忘れられたものを童話的に蘇らせるやつで、今まで誰も破ったことがないとか。それでついたあだ名が触れられぬもの。
フラットスナークじゃないのか？
それもあだ名。とにかく正体がわからないやつばっかりなんで、一つの個体に複数の名前が付けられるの。フラットスナークはその中でも正体不明さはトップランクのデタラメぶりよ。あなたルイス・キャロルのスナーク狩りって本知ってる？
いや、そもそもルイス・キャロルというのは。
そっからか。ドジスン教授はそうね、特殊性癖を持った妄想紳士ってとこ。まあこっちは別にどうでもいいか。人によっては時間の無駄だろうし、今重要なのは彼が残した著作の方。
Oh, I hit the
キャ
button
ロルら
twice.
しい、皮肉ばっちり、支離滅裂、意味不明、結末不在の本当に困った本で、一行は島で苦しみつつ最終的にはスナークを見つけるものの、 見つけたベイカーは唐突に姿を消して終わってしまう。
Okay. The Hunting of the Snark is a book about a band of adventurers who try to capture an unidentified monster known as the Snark. They're very careless, satirical, nonsensical, and cryptic. It doesn't even really have an ending either, though the party does ultimately find a Snark on its island after much hardship. It ends with the protagonist who found it, the baker, suddenly disappearing.
よくわからないもの探しに奔走する人間の風刺なんだけど、この遊園地において誰がベイカーで何がスナークかは言うまでもないでしょ。
I've never heard of this fairy tale, have you, chat? Elko elected not to share this, but Flat Snark had other popular names as well. The Enigmatic Island, the Five-Dimensional Plane. These names were not given to it by Alice, but rather muttered by mages whom the monsters defeated. In mathematics, snark is a term used in graph theory to refer to contradictory and impossible planar graphs. A plane, proven to be unable to exist in this world, was given the name apt for an ill-fated existence paradoxical in nature. The fairy tale monster ascribed this name was said to hold no form discoverable by man. Elko also declined to mention something else. Flat Snark was a fairy tale monster that could grow. It would hide somewhere in the amusement park, continuously exhaling magical energy until the park completely transformed into a fantasy land.
ま、脅かしてもしょうがないし。
何か言ったか？
別に。簡単に言って、童話世界の再生がフラットスナークの力なの。この遊園地との相性は抜群でしょうね。何しろ元々が童話を元にした遊び場だから。
If this had been a business district, for example, Flat Snark would have posed far less a threat. At most, its power would be limited to projecting shadows of a dinosaur into a building's window panes.
あ、だからここは安全だって。ん？
Sojiro realized that something was wrong when he noticed a gluttonous liquid dripping onto his back. That's bad!
あ、
Her power comes from joy and whimsy, indeed. He looked up to the ceiling. Their eyes met. Before he had a chance to think, Sojiro hopped up from the floor.
青崎外だ!
Taking the initiative, he jumped out from behind the counter.
バカ、何して!
Trying to stop him from committing an act of suicide, she also came to her feet. Immediately, she noticed something coming to life overhead.
やばっ!
The gargantuan mouth clamped shut. With no mascot to speak of, the burger joint itself began to transform into one giant monster.
もう、なんで天井にピエロの絵なんて描いてんのよ、あの店。普通もっと違うところに労力割かない？そんなにピエロが好きなら入り口にでも飾っとけ!
I'm sure that's a reference to McDonald's. Elko aired out her grievances as she ran. Looks like something from the Danganronpa execution. You know what? Kinda. There was no safe haven left. Moment by moment, the last remnants of civilization were being eroded away by fairy tales. A body has been discovered! What the fuck? I know they said dragons were here, but what the hell? The amusement park had reached the final stage of snarkification. It was not just the mascot characters that had been granted life. Like the burger joint, even the buildings had begun to transform. The roller coaster that made its way around the park writhed and twisted into a Chinese dragon. You know, I was thinking about 100 line earlier for some reason. You know, just cause? Nah, I'd win. How? Like, what are we supposed to do? How did we get out of this? Naoko and Sojiro stared dumbfoundedly by the Ferris wheel, which had grown to over 250 feet in height. Hordes of breadmen closed in on them, as if to offer tickets.
この列整理は間に合ってるっての!
Mobs of trinkets, actual kickshaws, rampaged the park. Whenever a hole was punctured in the environment, it was instantly filled. It was a battle of attrition with no end in sight. But that was a matter of course, as there were a few fairy tales about limited resources.
なんかどうしようもないぞ。こいつら増える一方だ。
スナーク本体を探して。童話の怪物には本体に当たる器物があるの。それさえ壊せば遊園地から出られるはず。
Tito would destroy those baguette mannequins. I don't know what you're referring to, but how you doing, Nika?
本体ってどんな？
さっき言ったでしょ。童話の怪物は現実にないものだって。今までいなかったおかしなやつとか現実じゃありえないもの、それが本体。
おかしなやつって例えば？
だから
Yes, that's what he's literally asking you to do.
命のある人形とか空飛ぶゴーカートとか。
Malco paused her firing for a moment. After saying this out loud, she realized just how deep their grave was dug. The amusement park was a treasure trove of fairy tale-esque creatures on any given day. Who could say it was impossible amidst the newly transfigured dicknecks running around?
そっか、おかしくないやつなんて一つもないんだ。この中に紛れ込んでる。
Good, I spent all day cleaning and doing chores I put up because of work. That must be a good feeling to finally get everything clean. Hoping that she was wrong, Oko bit her bottom lip. Flat Snark was a type of ploy that deployed bounded fields. Seeing as it was commanding so many familiars, it would not be unusual for its main body to have little or even no defenses. Furthermore, it was modeled from a story about it being untouchable and unidentifiable. It would be logical to assume that it would collapse in on itself shortly after being discovered.
逆に言えば、見つければ私たちの勝ち。そんな脆いやつが雑魚に紛れ込む。木の葉を隠すなら森の中って言うけど。
This was closer to the truth than Orko realized. As long as there was the slightest possibility of being hit by one of Orko's stray bullets, it would not dare appear in front of them. Its true form was orchestrating the park from somewhere safe.
でも、どこかに見えているはず。スナークは本の主題だもの。常にページのどこかにいないと主人公の資格がない。
But where? Put very simply, the Ferris wheel was the safest location in the park, as well as the symbol of its past glory. Perhaps.
あの子を捕まえるのは？
Her eyes opened wide at the sudden suggestion. While Oka had been trying to come up with a plan to overcome this stalemate, it seemed that Sojiro had been racking his brain as well. His proposal was a simple one. If they could not find the Snark, they just needed to take out its master, Alice. Is this a dating sim or a visual novel of some kind? It is a visual novel that will lead into a dating sim. It's kind of a prequel to the actual dating sim. Alice had not moved at all from the clock tower. Even from here, they could make out her figure draped in moonlight.
それは一番ダメ。アリスを殺してもフラットスナークは止まらないし、このトンデモが外に溢れ出すことになる。だいたい私じゃあの子を殺せないから、よくて半殺しがいいところ。
Our bread man, angered at the insults hurled toward his master, moved to attack and was mercilessly burned to a crisp. Oh, seeing some of the plot is still stuck in your head? Fair enough. We haven't even seen, we still, as far as, Wonderland goes, we still haven't seen some of the crazier ones, but, like, it just takes a little too much work to get to those endings, man. The two stood back to back, catching their breath. With no plan to speak of and no route to escape, they had reached the rock bottom. Meanwhile, the oddities were forming a circle around their prey as if they smelled blood in the water. Were they to be dragged into a bakery for the oven, minced into the meat grinder at the butcher shop, skewed and paraded around atop the carousel, walked to the plank of the thorny pirate ship? After 2 years of slumber, they were eager to welcome their new guests.
一応聞いておきたいんだけど。
何？手短にね。今考え事してるから。
ああ、あの連中が何をしたいか嫌っていうほど伝わってくるんだけど、それってあの子の趣味なのかな？
その疑問はなかったわ。連中の人間嫌いは遊園地の怨念と フラットスナークの性格じゃない？基本的にまともなやついないから、アリスの使い魔って。
I feel like when I would have gotten to the point where I could just skip battles, I would lose all interest. That's kind of what happened to us, honestly. Although I still find it funny how we went till midnight on one of the 100 line streams. That's true. Listen, it's not that it's a bad game. It's just really fucking long.
あ、でも。
Alka was unable to deny that there were some similarities.
それは結構。それで青崎の考え事って？
期待させて悪いけどお手上げ。ま、あんたが殺されれば止まるでしょうけど。
Why are those human-like baguettes mad at a park? Basically, what's happened is that the girl was supposed to kill the guy, but she decided not to because the guy has helped save her life from a third-party threat. And now another girl is trying to kill both of them. And basically the other girl has turned this amusement park into her domain expansion. I don't know if you've seen Jujutsu Kaisen. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. I'll come up with another explanation if you've not seen Jujutsu Kaisen.
それは嫌だ。とりあえず逃げよう。
え、しずきくん？
She blinked in surprise at the sudden turn in events. Sojiro, who had until now been meekly following her lead, had grabbed Alko's hand and pulled with him into a head-on charge at the swarm of bread in an attempt to break out of the encirclement.
意味わかんなすぎ。なんで今の流れでそうなるのよ、あんたは。
Alko nonetheless followed Sojiro's uncharacteristic gung-ho lead, cursing him all the while. Alone, he had no chance of breaking through the surrounding wall of enemies with brute force. Alko regained her bearings and let fly a spray of magical bullets ahead of Sojiro. They burst through the net and ran as hard as they could. At this point, all that was left to do was what they had planned from the outset: get out of the park. But not before addressing what needed to be addressed.
なんでよ、さっきはあんなに諦めよかったのに。
Alko could not begin to comprehend Sojiro's reaction.
ミラーハウスの時と今は違うだろ。いいから走れ。
違わないわよ。あんたを殺そうとした私も、あんたを殺したいアリスも、理由の結果も同じよ、私たち。
Though she wondered what was getting her so worked up, Aoka did not stop. She told herself that the degree of Sojiro's stupidity, charging the breadman so recklessly, had caused her to lose her cool.
あのね、一緒に逃げてるぐらいで勘違いしないでくれる？言っとくけど私、明日になったらまたあんたを殺しに行くから。死にたくないってんなら、ここで私からも逃げ出したら？
それはまた今度の話だろう。だいたい青崎に殺されるのならいいけど、あの子に殺されるのは嫌だ。
だからなんで？
だって顔も知らない、話したことさえない相手だ。
It was like someone had doused water over her blazing fury. Aoko's anger was snuffed out by the absurd simplicity of his reasoning. Why don't you want to die to her? You're just gonna die to me. I don't know that hoe. That's basically what just happened.
顔も知らないって。
Could it be that Sojiro did not mind being killed by someone as long as he had met them? Aoko grimaced as she followed him. From her spot atop the clock tower, the girl observed the growth of her familiar. Flat Snark. A savior of the discarded. It was a vile, vulgar fairy tale monster who provided the abandoned by... What? It was a vile, vulgar fairy tale monster who provided those abandoned by fate with a glimmer of hope before snatching it away. Alice had it under her control, but she was still keen to keep the Snark from expressing its bad habits. After completing a lap around the park that had now reached the size of an entire town, the robin made its situation report.
そう。外を目指しているの。
It seemed Aoka was prioritizing the safety of the boy. Even if it resulted in wasting an entire day, choosing not to capitulate on a decision was very much like her.
青子のことだから、時計台ごと私を焼き払いに来るかと思ったけど。
The bluebird cheeped in response. Was it denying its master's portrait of Aoko? Or agreeing that it was Aoko's style to do exactly that? An outsider might interpret its interjections either way.
退屈
The robin jumped at being addressed so unexpectedly. It chirped and flapped its wings like a flustered servant frantic to say otherwise.
珍しく気があったわね。いいわ。せっかくのゲームだし、もう少しだけ盛り上げましょう。
Like, come on, bro. Like, what are we supposed to do? How are we get out of this? Calmly, she pulled out a small object from her pocket. It was a dark gray Easter egg, and emanating from inside was the ticking of a clock. The robin knew it to be a ploy kickshaw with a bad attitude far exceeding flat snarks, knowing to be amongst the best in one-on-one situations.
いってらっしゃい。称える時間は20分に設定したわ。
Was that a fucking magic egg timer?
いつも通り、控えめに壊れてきて。
It was a magic egg timer. And you know what's weird, Chad? If I had a nickel for every magic egg timer I've ever seen, I'd have 2 nickels, but it's weird that that happened twice. And together with the witch's breath, the egg filled with praise disappeared. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through the park. The words, "I could have killed them all by myself," floated through the air. It was the disappointment of something enormous that was visible to all yet overlooked. Aoko and Sojiro continued their dash toward the boundary separating the park from outside. The curio horde that stood in their way had reduced in number. The iron fence that separated the two from the outside world was just over 300 yards away. Fortunately, there was no particularly large buildings barring their path. If the Ferris wheel had stood in their way, that would have spelled the end, but thankfully it had yet to reach its full strength. The only things that appeared before them were weak oddities that could easily be handled by Oko's simple magecraft. She would have said make it to the fence, if only her looks would allow it. Since Oko was utilizing the ample mana filling the park, her tank of magical energy was nearly full. Moreover, the condition of her body's circuits was steadily improving to the extent that she would be able to unleash at least one all-out onslaught. I almost said all-out attack. I've been waiting for this! Until something unusual was hovering above the field of vision. He was locked on Sojiro, hovering 10 feet above him, over to one side.
しずきくん、ちょっと。
ああ、さっきからついてきてる。
You noticed? Sojiro had seemingly noticed it before Oko, hence his previous awkward glances towards the sky. In truth, it would have been strange for him not to notice since the thing was practically glued to him. Bonafide? Monafide. In terms of its size, the floating object measured about 3 feet in diameter. Tiles covered its exterior, about which of a multitude of spinning lights dance about.
卵かな。
Egg thief, Sojiro was asked, not really sure what to call it.
卵？卵って言ったら割れる卵。
And the cartoon puffs of smoke. Her bullets bounced off of it like it was made of rubber. Yo ho ho, we took a bite of gum gum. That trait, the ability to deflect all outside interference, confirmed to Oko that that thing was undoubtedly a ploy kickshaw.
やっぱり外からのルールじゃ壊れないか。しずきくん、あれから絶対に目をそらさないで。いい。何があっても見続けること。視界の隅に入れとくだけでいいから。
あ、ああ。
Oko picked up her pace as she barked orders. Oh god, it's Bugs Bunny. Pick a god and pray. You're never getting out of this alive, partner. You do realize this means war. The Eggman who sat on the wall, a Humpty Dumpty? He would crack, just as the tale spoke of. Nothing anyone could do or say would cause him to fall, but the moment they stopped looking, he would tumble down and break into pieces.
いわく、王様の軍隊でも元に戻せない数の破片。
He was the Mother Goose poem Humpty Dumpty. If Sojiro was his target, then the moment he averted his gaze, it would tumble and explode.
まあ爆発するかどうかは知らないけど。
Either way, it was going to scatter something troublesome when it fell. Its oval shape, the keyhole adorning the front, and writing inscribed upon it. They all made her anxious. If it was an egg, that meant it was going to hatch at some point. Even if he continued his stare, once the time came for whatever was inside to come out, they would have even less ability to conserve their energy.
青崎、早すぎないか。あまり全力で走ると。
後のことは考えないで。いいからしずきくんは卵だけに集中して。
At this critical juncture, breadmen stepped on to join the egg and block their path.
邪魔！
The breadmen were marching forth in a grand battalion. At her level of firepower, Aoka should have easily mowed them down. However, all you have to do is break it. Not even all the horses and king's men can put the fucker back together again. It's true. It's true, Chad. It's true. That's bad for us.
肩焼きかこの。
If Snap failed to do the job, that meant it was time for her to put her crest to use. Draw a formula-triggered bullet encased in a full-wind jacket. If her previous shots were the equivalent of machine gun volley, then this was her artillery shot. That's what I'm used to seeing. The hard crust bread that had absorbed her snap without a dent scattered into thousands of tiny pieces at her dross torrent. Okay, but you're not looking at the egg, though. Of course, the destruction did not end with just breadmen. What had once been a brick road was now thoroughly stripped of its pavement. The nearby stalls had warped into twisted steel skeletons. It was a spectacle that made Sojiro question what the greater obstacle to their escape was, the wall of breadmen and Oroko's ability to lay waste to things.
ちょっとなんで距離取るのよそこ。そばにいないと危ないじゃない。ほらもっとこっち。言っとくけど、あんたがあいつらに囲まれちゃったらアウトよ。私、人質とか意味ないタイプだし、そもそも区別して撃つとか、そういうのできないし。
This made a lot of sense to Sojiro. He had not fully appreciated the part about hostages, but he got the gist of it.
つまり、今はどこであろうと危険なのか。
あんたね。
Offended though she was by his typical naive response, she could not help but be impressed. Sojiro was a straight arrow through and through. His eyes stayed firmly focused on the egg overhead, even amidst the chaos of the melee unfolding before him.
その分なら安心か。物分かりは悪いけど、一度言われたことはきっちり守るあたり、あなたのいいところよね。
そんなことより青崎、俺の気のせいならいいんだけど、さっきのパン、硬くなかったか。
まあね、あいつら少しずつ強くなってきてるわ。大量生産が軌道に乗ったんで、今度はクオリティアップをテーマにしたのかも。しずきくんでもお察しの通り、ここからは手強くなっていく一方よ。あのパンたちでさえ個体差が出てきたみたいだし。
Alright, before we continue, I gotta use the bathroom. Sorry, chat, in the 2 seconds I left, use the bathroom. The cat has usurped my seat, so I had to get them out of my chair.
考えたくないけど、そのうちジャム塗ったりレタス乗っけたり、果ては合体したりして。
This reminds me of the one dude in Whole Cake Island. No, the cat's the streamer now. Though she was joking, her eyes were dead serious. Sojiro shuddered at the thought of the situation growing even more dire.
じゃあ、そのうちミラーハウスの人形ぐらいに怖くなるのか、あいつら。
間違いなくね。そこまでレアなパンになったら、私も自分だけで手一杯になる。ところでしずきくん、ああいうのと喧嘩できる？
Sojiro shook his head, a look of complete aversion upon his face.
でしょ？なら急ぎましょう。いろいろ余裕ないんだから。
Malco took a quick quick, deep breath and then began to sprint once again. Far in the distance, through the fog, the iron fence waited 300 paces away. As long as nothing happened, they would make it there in one piece. Sojiro followed after Aoko, holding on to that all too convenient hope. But hope was something ever fleeting. In fact, it lasted not even 300 yards. The edge of the amusement park may well have been the edge of the world. So, to put in perspective how short 300 yards is, most people in high school, relatively athletic, can probably run 100 yards in 15, 16 seconds. Maybe less than, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on how athletic they are. So theoretically speaking, it would take about a minute and 30 seconds for less than average people to sprint 300 yards. So that hope did not last a minute. What the fuck? Dozens of undulating horizons could be seen, crowding under the sky like a giant cloud or a thick curtain, or perhaps groaning lips. It was the end of the road, the outer limit of the outrageous and fantastical realm. And yet, Naoko found it much like the last page of an enormous picture book. The sight turned her mind blank. Well, this is about as bad as it gets, she thought. The snark, this island of despair, had at last brought Aoko to her knees as she stared at the swelling border. The park indeed had an end. Even now, Aoko was in Sojiro had expected a fence divided the amusement park from the residential areas neighboring it. It had both doubled in height and had made sturdier another hurdle she had foreseen before even laying eyes on it. Expecting it to have a reading is so hard. Expecting it to have been snarkified, Aoko had come prepared to demolish an obstacle or two. But this constructed before her went far beyond a mere wall. I just saw an image with the caption, "I choose to believe this shit, not because it's true, but because it's funny, and I've never felt so called out." It's that same, it's the same as that JoJo meme. That's bullshit, but I believe it. It was an ocean that separated the underworld from the mortal one. The iron fence was like a restless, surging sea. One or two walls could easily be toppled, or even 10 or 20 could be dealt with, one way or another. Between the power left in her body, which filled the park, putting on a brave front was within her power. She could fully mobilize her circuits and crests to the point of burnout in a last-ditch effort, like some reenactment of the parting of the Red Sea.
でも、それで終わり。
Even if a path could be opened, she would not have the energy left to walk it. And it was obvious what would become of her afterwards. The residents would hardly forgive her for wreaking such havoc around their park. Like ants drawn to honey, they would swarm the helpless girl and tear her to pieces. Despondent and exhausted, she felt the faint sting of remorse. Escaping the park. Looking back on how they'd gotten here, Aoko recognized that her choices had been her undoing. I feel like my cookies have cooled off now. How long have they been cooling? Under the golden full moon, beams of steel bent and merged like wireframe sculptures. It was only a matter of time before the amusement park itself became a colossal monster. The horde of familiars gathered in the plaza where Alice was had formed an impenetrable blockade around her. Just above the head of the boy beside her, the whispering egg, called Scratch Dumpty, continued to shuffle what appeared on its surface.
Aozaki.
Shizuki-kun.
The boy's voice snapped Aoko out of her trance, if only for a moment. The stark reality of the situation dawned on the novice mage. The sheer hopelessness of it all as it ripped out and snatched away any will she had to resist. Since it's not a stream, oh, it's definitely fine, man.
ここはどうしようもないけど、 入り口ならもうちょっとマシだろ。フラットスナークだっけ。こいつにもルールがあるって言ったじゃないか。ならこれは役割の問題だ。初めから鉄柵は通れない壁だけど、ゲートなら出入り口として機能しているかもしれない。
Sojiro had not given in to panic. Naoko found herself honestly admiring Sojiro's ability to analyze Snunk's characteristics given the circumstances. Now calm, she steeled her resolve.
そうね。確かに門はあると思う。けど、たどり着くのは難しいわ。一番弱かった焼きたてパンですら、今はもうあれだもの。広場や入り口には、もっと上等なのがたむろしてるだろうし、門だって、あの観覧車以上の怪物かもしれない。確か、大きなキッツィちゃんだったでしょ。
青崎はゲートには行かないのか。
まあね。それよりこっちの方が現実的だし。
Naoko took another glance at the undulating iron fences. It was too late to achieve their goal of making Ad alive. In that case, she decided to prioritize the other promise she had made.
今からこの鉄柵を壊すから、あなたはそこから外に出て。
Well, he's going to pick you up and carry you out of the thing, you know.
それで、私の役割はおしまいよ。
Though her words were few, her tone told the whole story. She was telling him to escape by himself.
信じられない。こんなの青崎だけじゃ壊せないだろ。
私だけならね。でも今はこの遊園地が味方してる。燃料がこれだけあるんだから、私は重心になるだけでいいんだし。それでも1回が限度だから、穴を開けたらあんたには全力で走り抜けてもらうしかないけど。
She would carve a path through the iron sea of fences, gambling on one final effort, a great incantation to launch the biggest projectile she could manage. As an outsider, Sojiro could not even begin to imagine how much of the burden this would be for her. All he could imagine was a hazy vision of Oko being left behind in this park. What would happen to her? Would that girl in black come to save her? Cruel as it was to imagine, he knew she would not. After Oko had exhausted her very best in order to save him, that girl would not stay at her hand. The only way Alice would let Oko off the hook was if Oko killed Sojiro as payment. And so?
20メートルぐらい離れてて。準備に手間取るけど、その卵の表面が茹で上がるまでには終わらせるから。
Cookies are good? That's good. You went without saying that this was the only path. Personally, I like soft cookies. I don't know, like, I think the people who like hard cookies are fucking freaks. Like, what is wrong with you? And then the people who like oatmeal raisin cookies, something is wrong with y'all too.
待ってくれ。俺を逃がすって言うけど、それに意味はあるのか、青崎。
ないけど、外に出られたところでアリスから逃げ切れるとは思えないし。けど、これぐらいは最後の意地よ。守るって言ったんだから、できるところまでやらないと。
Surprised by her seemingly moral stance, Sojiro saw Oko in a new light. But of course, Sojiro realized that she was not fighting for his sake, but for the sake of her pride.
そうだったな。けど、それなら俺だけ逃がすのはらしくないぞ。
何よ。いいから離れてて。
Oko eased off just a bit. She recalled how, an hour ago, he had gotten the better of her.
青崎、まだ意地を張れるんなら他のことをやろう。このお化けみたいな鉄柵を壊せるなら他に壊すべきものがあるはずだ。
ないわよ。悪いけど、私は目に見えるものしか壊せないの。最後まで形のない希望にすがるとか考えるのも寒気がする。いい？今はフラットスナークなんかより、この壁を壊してあんたを足抜けさせるのが私の現実。私に負える最大限の責任って。
逃げるのか。
Oko was about to turn her back on him when Sojiro clutched her hand. His words caused something inside her to boil with rage. It was as though someone had set her heart on fire. The surprise that pricked open her true feelings and the disappointment she felt towards herself thawed her frozen limbs.
誰が逃げるのはそっちで、逃がしてあげるのはこっちだって言うのよ。甘く見ないで。 いざとなったら遊園地ごと爆破してみせるわ。
そうか。ならここで俺を逃がすのは無駄だな。その気迫は本命のために取っておこう。それまでは俺も手伝うから。
は？手伝う？それこそ無駄な気遣いよ。あったまきた。いいから逃げろバカ。だいたい走り詰めで息も絶え絶えなやつなんか使えないわよ。
そりゃいい加減ヘトヘトだけど、そういう青崎なんか疲れ以上に傷の方が痛んでるだろ。
Not to mention the injury to her back that Oko had nearly forgotten about. Even now, she couldn't ignore the pain that the automaton had inflicted on her spine. With iron will, she managed to push it out of her mind, mostly.
ほら、魔術とか抜きにすればまだ俺の方がマシじゃないか。入り口までおぶっていくことぐらいならなんとか。
できないことは口にしないで。もういいから言って。慣れているもの、私は。でもあなたは違う。こういう
No
の初
thoughts
めて
had
でしょ。
empty, indeed.
だからいいの。
The fact that they were a team. The fact that she would still have to kill him after all of this. None of the irony was lost on her as she said these words. It didn't matter anymore. Still, Sojiro didn't let go of her hand. He gripped it even harder. His expression was the same as ever. Oko frowned, trying to figure out if he was upset with her.
確かにこういうのは初めてだ。けど山じゃ危険な目ぐらい合ってる。鹿に襲われたことだってあるんだぞ、俺は。
Do they not have the Men in Black pen to wipe someone's memory? Nah, but... You would think at some point they would make a spell like that, right? As a city girl, she had no idea what it meant to be attacked by a deer, but his determination was apparent enough. True. Looking back on it now, he had maintained his composure through it all. A normal person would barely be able to talk through such panic. Perhaps growing up deep in the mountains, far from civilization, had taught him how to stay calm in the face of so much.
だから信じてくれ。少しでいいから。
He spoke his plain, unadulterated feelings, and released his hand. There was no lie in him. In fact, he was too honest, so much that she found it hard to believe him. Sojiro had no reason to go that far. As it stood, Aoko had no future. After confessing this and telling him to escape, why did this boy still offer to help a person like her?
わからない。どうしてそこまでするの？私に付き合えばあなたは死ぬのよ。これが最後だからちゃんと考えてよね。あなたはここで逃げるべきよ。
What the hell is this?
You know, every time a normal person sees one of us do magic, we always kill them. There has to be some way to like wipe their memory or something, so we don't have to murder anyone. What the fuck are you talking about? Killing people is fun. Murder.
それはわかるよ。でも行かない。
Sojiro answered immediately, realizing that Oko was looking for his reason. The level of insight in Sojiro demanded a round of applause.
そうすると青崎が死んでしまいそうだ。
His words were as irrational as always.
だからどうしてそこまでするのよ、あんたは。
She was yelling at her frustration. After thinking for a moment, Sojiro replied,
そりゃ君が好きだからだろ。
So, I don't think he means it in the romantic sense, but she's probably gonna take it that way. Simple and to the point. His face seemed to ask why she would even question himself. There was a pause, no more than 2 seconds. His surprise attack had stopped Oko in her tracks. Alice was not the only one who had an ace up her sleeve. That line reached deeper even the flat snark could ever hope to. All Oko could respond with was an expression of pure shock. It was a simple, stubborn reason, the strongest kind on earth. Sojiro Shizuki was indeed incomprehensible, to be able to work unconditionally with someone who was trying to kill him. But she felt as though she'd finally grasped a sliver of his true nature. Tobimaru and the others' assessment of him was correct. As vexing as it was for her to admit.
バカね。私はあなたのこと嫌いなのに。
She laughed at her sour grumbling. At this point, he was used to her insults. The clash of their wills ended here. Aoko's blood ran hot from her blazing heart. If he was going to make a face like that, all she could do was try to think of a way to get them both home.
私だって逃げっぱなしは性に合わないし。いいわよ。最後まで粘ってみる。それにしずきくんが付き合ってくれるなら、何かの役には立つでしょ。
Though her tone had lightened, there was still hesitation in her eyes. It was only natural. Aoko had not even a clue as to how to begin to fight the snark. If only she had been just a bit more skilled or had trained just a bit more, there might have been some way to look for it.
我ながら情けない。せめて正体を暴く手がかりでもあればいいんだけど。
Unconsciously, she let her apprehension show. Sniveling was pointless. She would just have to figure it out by herself, but...
なんだ、正体さえ分かればいいのか?
Aoko gave him a look as if to ask that was what was supposed to... Aoko gave him a look as if to ask what that was supposed to mean.
いや、だからおかしなものはどれかってことだろ?
Sojiro had made a face that suggested she should have brought it up sooner.
わかるのあんた。
多分。いや、結構前から気になっていたんだけど。
Sojiro whispered in her ear quietly, so not to be overheard. It was certainly unexpected, but then again, equally obvious. After he explained the mistake, she knew right away that he was correct. At last, she had an inkling of Flat Snark's original form. Namely, so this is what I was talking about before when we were talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Chat. You see how they didn't say it out loud to us, the reader, so that way it could still be a surprise? They strategized for 10 minutes. After deliberating the Snark's true form and figuring out a plan of attack, the two exchanged nods in acceptance of their roles.
それじゃあ、ここからは別行動ね。でも、ミラーハウスの時みたいなのは勘弁してよ。この作戦の肝はあなたなんだから。開始1分でドジったら、本当に打つ手なしだからね。
Though she jabbed him from his previous failure as a decoy, her voice was bright. Aoko's original vigor had returned to her at Sojiro's discovery of the truth. Meanwhile, Sojiro was also getting anxious in his own way. He took Aoko's warning to heart.
ならいいけど。いい？さっきと立場は反対よ。失敗したら死ぬのは私じゃなくてそっち。もうフォローに回れないから、できるだけ慎重にね。
分かってる。今更ながら、やっぱりさっき逃がしてもらえばよかったと思うぐらい。慎重だ。
Sojiro nodded, telling her to leave it to him. Though he made it sound like he was holding a grudge, it seemed to him to be the only way of showing her his resolve. Aoko let out a sigh of defeat. Once more, she couldn't figure him out.
ほんと、大バカなんだか大物なんだか。でも任せた。期待してるわ、しずきくん。
He had wanted to say that she believed in him, but apparently that was too embarrassing for her. Aoko turned away from Sojiro and began to run. She had begun to think that maybe this change of pace was not so bad after all. And so ended the intermission. The young cast of characters were handed their new lines. Whatever happened next, the Night of Witches had, at long last, entered its climax. Anime character try to show emotion challenge impossible? Yeah, that's also true.
別行動？あの二人が？
She was filled with the foreboding at the Robin's report. With a foreboding? With foreboding. Apparently, they had gone in opposite directions. The park's residents had set off after the boy's witness, and it would take them mere minutes to capture him, so the bird said.
どういうこと？追いかけているのは本当に彼？青子が変装しているのではなく？
The robin flapped its wings, chirping away any doubt. It had seen them with its own two eyes. Oko was heading for the plaza while the cocky brat was making a run for the roller coaster.
青子が彼を見捨てた？ですって？ そんな簡単なことならいいけど、ダンプティは彼に張り付いているの？
The robin nodded enthusiastically. It didn't know about the other birds, but with its superior night vision, it had seen that sucker clearly because he had moved to a high point.
ダンプティはなんて？最後まで歌わせろ。こんな褒め殺したい間抜けはまたとない。ですって。
Crash Dumpty was a ticking time bomb that would drop and detonate the moment the target averted its gaze. That is, as long as his target continued to observe him in a way, he was gentlemanly ploy kickshaw, though Alice wished he would forgo such niceties when in battle.
そうね。視線を切らないだけではダンプティからは逃げられない。表面の死が完成すれば扉が開く。彼がどこまで逃げようと、あと少しでダンプティがしまってくれるわ。
Until the park, or rather the Snark, was destroyed, Sojiro would not be able to escape. Which meant the larger concern was Aoko. Aoko had promised to protect the boy, which begged the question, where was she running to?
ここにいる限り、青子の動向はつかめない。
Alice looked over the park, ignoring the robin's attempt to get her attention with his plumage. Flat Snark nearly reached its full size. It was a different breed of beast compared to the other cheap ploys. To her, he was one of 3 most irreplaceable and precious familiars.
そうね。任せたわスナーク。青子が諦めない以上、あなたも手は抜かないで。
Alice remained where she was. With the same historical merit as the troll under the bridge and the poison-clawed reptile, Flat Snark was one of Alice's ultimate ploys. Hello, guess what? What's up, Sia? Sia Bun, what's good? Which pop? What's good? You see any buns? Okay, anyway. She was placing her trust in its reputation and ability.
でも忘れないで。これはゲームよ。
One I'm watching Kids Next Door, and it's pretty good too. My birthday is at the end of this month. Well, happy early birthday. If we don't see you until the end of the month, happy early birthday. Kids Next Door was actually really good, yes. My favorite thing was seeing what kind of gadgets they were using for the episode.
勝敗がついたのなら、私のところに帰ってきて。
The drifting fog ignored the master's words. It was one thing that Alice had misread. Flat Snark was a king, even among the other ploys, of terrible vulgar antics. Death to the defeated, gruesome tragedy to the vanquished. It found no pleasures until it brought about dramatic ruination of life and wealth. The fog billowed like a wicked laughter. After all, only a king had the right to decide the fate of the vanquished, and the Snark's greed could not be contained. Thus, it hadn't even the slightest intent to play fair, despite its master's orders. Over 100 feet high, one careful step at a time, the figure made its way gingerly up the track, which stretched into the heart of the amusement park. He stayed his beating chest and pounded his he stayed his beating chest and the pounding of his breath. Even tiny movements were an obstacle to his progress. Amazingly, the one making this pale face advance higher and higher was Sojiro Shizuki. Far below, he saw a horde of bread creatures had congregated by the roller coaster platform. As they bustled his way in, and that their numbers continued to increase by the minute, seemingly cheered on by Sojiro with his arms raised as he made his descent. Or rather, they jeered as if beckoning him to come down.
あれ、高いところは苦手なんだ。
Of course, neither did Sojiro, but his current state was the lesser of the two evils. The only thing that followed him was the floating egg. After heaving a huge sigh, Sojiro bent forward a bit and climbed the track that inclined towards the heavens. 150 feet now. If this were a skyscraper, he would be on the 16th floor. A strong gust of wind whipped through his hair. He was in an instinctual fear of heights. In particular, a place like this, which had called forth visions of falling to one's death, would cause a person's knees to tremble against their will. It was an instinct that forewarned death, urging its master to return to the safety of the ground. It was a reasonable reaction. Climbing the roller coaster tracks went beyond funny stories and into the realm of fantasy. The strong winds and change in air pressure were a hindrance. His instinct screamed at him to stop, causing his limbs to go numb, his muscles to go limp, his mind to race. Even if he had been tied to a lifeline, a mere 15 feet of climbing would have still caused his thoughts to freeze out of sheer terror. And it would only get worse from here, exponentially so. Every foot forward increased the load on both his mind and his body by another degree.
よし、頂上まであと少し。
The burden on his mind notwithstanding, he carefully measured the toll on his body with every step. His legs, which had carried him running this far, threatened to buckle the moment he let his guard down. The fatigue was likely why Aoko had stressed that Sojiro's robe was more dangerous than hers.
待てよ。逆を言うと、疲れてなければなんとかなると思ってたんだよな。
Sojiro laughed as he stared at the floating egg. He reflected on the course of events that had led to this absurd situation. Not even 10 minutes ago, they had been engaged in conversation.
じゃあ次ね。正体が分かった以上、あとはどう壊すかを話し合いましょう。
Sojiro felt a shudder travel down his spine at Aoko's smug grin. In hindsight, Aoko had been more than happy at this point to make him do something absurd.
どう壊すかって、それなら。
Sojiro wondered out loud. From what he'd seen, Aoko had enough firepower to tear clean through the fence. He refrained from speculating about Flatsnock's true form because he'd felt there was nothing they could do about it, even if they knew. But that had changed. For Aoko, the impossible was quite literally within her grasp.
そうでもないわ。私の目算だと、あと50メートル分、ギリギリで届かない。
Despair filled Sojiro's eyes. Aoko lifted a hand to her long hair with a magically charged fingertip, clipped a tuft out of it. I missed the part? Don't worry, Skydam, I upload everything to YouTube, so all you have to do is hit !archive, and then you can get the YouTube channel.
足りない分は努力と根性ってね。あなたはできるだけ高いところまで逃げて。頃合いを見て合図を出すから。そうしたらこれを空に放ってくれる？
But based on where Aoko pointed her gaze, she did not really mean to leave it up to Sojiro to pick the highest place he could find. Nothing beats the live version, though. It's true. Thank you, Bacha.
つまり、青崎とは別行動をとって、あの怪物たちに追われながら、高いところに逃げ込めと。
そういうこと。ほら、あのうねうね動き出してるコースターのレールとか、よくない？
There were two demons in this park. Her smile made even Sojiro want to respond that it was far from perfect.
疑いたくはないんだが、本当はあの子とグルで俺を遠回しに殺そうとしてるんじゃないか。
This is way too much work just to kill you.
あら、私に殺されるのならいいんでしょ？
人の出現を悪用するのは良くないと思う。
The part where Sujiro says he likes Aoko, I still don't think he meant that in like a romantic sense. He just meant that I like you. Like, you're cool. I can kick it with you. I like the kind of person that you are. Sojiro hung his head. This was not the same. This was not sane. If he did as she said, he would die from exhaustion before Kitsu even had a chance to eat him.
私だって鬼じゃないわ。ほら、こっち向いて。おまじないかけてあげる。
It was the lightest of touches, close enough for their breath and skin to come in contact.
Oh.
Zaki, he finished with a hushed voice. For one of them, this is rather mundane magecraft. For the other, it was a head-spinning, intimate ambush.
軽く、弱く、うまく、早く。チクタク、チクタク。急げや急げ。
the words that could not be produced by a normal larynx carrying a peculiar weight to them reverberated against his eardrums. If words were given colors, these would have been the color of her name, blue. Sojiro's exhausted body and burning blood gently cooled.
飛ぶ、泳ぐ、駆け抜ける。チクタクチクタク、汽笛を鳴らせ。星はいつでも北の空。どこまでも、いつまでも。
In reality, it took but a few seconds, but the sudden contract had felt a lot longer.
よし、暗示成功。成功したはず。ここまで手応えがあったの初めてだし。
Eh?
アリスの小言もたまには役に立つじゃない。
Eh? A very merry Aoko stood aside a very confused Sojiro. After he asked what the heck had occurred, she responded,
簡単な暗示よ。一時的に恐怖心を消しておいたから、高いところに登っても平気なはず。あの手の作業で一番足を引っ張るのは同様でしょ。恐怖も何も感じなければ、地上何メートルだろうと平均台とそう変わらないってわけ。
He seemed to get it. It actually all sounded like Greek to Sojiro, but he accepted it as an explanation for her strange actions. I would like in these like scenes that the eggs be somewhere on the screen so that way we could also keep it in our field of vision, because there's no way he didn't stop looking at the egg. He arrived at the summit of the track. For nearly 200 feet, Sojiro had a bird's eye view of the entire amusement park. He's able to spot Oko's figure right away. In the plaza not far from here, he seemed to be occupied with something conspicuous. Her surroundings lay still. The breadmen were busy trying to figure out how to reach Sojiro by trial and error from the roller coaster's entrance. They were over 300 feet away now.
汗をかくはずだ。こんなに移動したのか。
The strong winter gales quickly dried the sweat on his brow, but he was drenched underneath his shirt. This much sweat was at least a half-mile run, not to mention all the scares that he had experienced through the night.
でもよかった。あとは合図を待つだけだ。
He felt a wave of relief, but not at the thought of Oko destroying the Snark and his nightmarish park. And this nightmarish park, he was simply happy that he could repay a bit of the debt from the House of Mirrors. A blue bullet rose from the plaza where Oko was located. Sojiro stood up atop of the tracks, pulled out the patch he'd stowed in his pocket, and tossed it forward. Without any regard for his questionable footing, he gave it a mighty overarm pitch. The small patch drew a parabolic curve in Oroko's direction, quickly becoming untied in midair. Inside the bag, the lock of hair and small stone weighed.
高いところから風に乗せてくれれば、あとは何とかするから。
Oko had said, but it was Sojiro's effort that had set the plane in motion. The tuft of hair remained airborne, drifting as if watching over its owner. Sojiro's job was done. He remained concerned about the egg hovering over him, but there was nothing he could do about it. Sojiro breathed a sigh of relief and leaned forward to watch the rest of the plan unfold. But then, in the corner of his eye, he thought he spotted something familiar approaching Aoko.
Route set.
Stick.
Direct. 1層、2層、予備に3層。
So I'm assuming she's about to fire a fucking magic cannon.
魔力提供。体現に固定。循環よし。射角よし。術式安定。大まかよし。
Formula stability, good enough. Magic missile, more like magic IBM. Magic nuke, yeah. A pattern began to carve itself into the brick street. The casting of an unprecedented incantation with unprecedented rage. Unprecedented. Keeping the rising tension contained within her chest, the fledgling mage snapped her fingers.
決めた。ツアープラン、スターマイン。
Or Maggie Dolan. I think Maggie Dolan would be much more of an explosion, right? The Maggie Dolan is more of an explosion. She's about to fire a fucking ground-to-air missile. She knew that the corner of the formula and raised her head to the night sky. Not even a glimpse of the transmogrified fantasy land around her entered her vision now. Only one thing, one untouchable thing was reflected in her blue eyes.
実はずっと気になっていたことが。
This is how the conversation started a few minutes prior. Sojiro began with a simple statement of fact. In truth, it really was the simplest of discrepancies. Any difference between the reality of an hour ago and the illusion of the present was both infinitesimal and infinite.
雲があったから勘違いしたんだろうけど。
It was hiding in plain sight. Too impossible to be real, too outlandish to be here. In this amusement park where every paradigm had shifted, something was brazenly flaunting its normalcy.
今夜は新月なんだ、青崎。
Ah, so the moon was the thing. I actually thought about that earlier because I was like, why is the moon here?
思えば、初めっからその形だったものね、あんたは。
The distance from Earth to the moon was 238,900 miles. We're going to steal the moon! We're actually gonna shoot the moon out of the fucking sky. She's using the eclipse cannon. If it was truly identical to the actual moon, then the monster indeed lived up to its eerie reputation. At a distance that vast, there would have been no need to hide. It could flaunt its true form for all to see. But it had to hide its true form. That meant it was vulnerable. The monster's camouflage implied that it sat within the reach of a human hands.
こっちの最大射程はよくて600ってところだけど。
At this point, it was time to give it all she had. Drawing on the energy surging throughout the park, she extended her firing arm. A blue firework launched into the air. Looking up at the hair dancing in the wind above, Oko reached out her hand as if to catch the night sky. A mage's own body made for the perfect catalyst. And for a female mage, the hair she had grown over many years made for a particularly valuable and powerful source of fuel. See, I would say sexism, but I think that's an actual thing in old-timey witchcraft. Like paganism witchcraft. To use it, all she had to do was apply her will. She locked the fingers on both her hands together and shouted,
三層展開全術式連結起動
She hurled forth a clear challenge to bind the moon to herself. The mist began to whirl about in a vortex. The monster high above bore its fangs at the sudden blue spell that appeared in midair.
見抜かれたです。
By the time Alice had noticed the change, the hostility between Aoko and the Snark was palpable.
そうなら青子の勝ちよ。すぐに戻りなさい。
No doubt that's Sokka's girlfriend! Why is Sokka's girlfriend trying to kill everyone?
ヒントの上げすぎだけど、それぐらいは多めに見て。スナーク
The fog continued to thicken with no sign of abating. The moon that floated in the night sky could not pardon such an insolent mage. As if the Lord of the Night would bow down to such impudence, there was no staying its wrath at the challenge so flagrant.
スナーク
The robin swooped in to give its report, but Alice waved it away. Her gaze was fixed on the transforming golden moon. Her cause of restraint did not reach it. The fairy tale monster was beholden to nobody, and it would have no qualms unleashing its vast might upon its puny prey. The core of her magic bullet howled. The magic circuits within her body spun. Aoko fed the magical energy, scorching her nerves with imaginary flame. She was linked to the formula inscribed on the ground. The spell was read and executed at the same as it always was, but its output was beyond reckoning. With this much firepower, even this mundane process would invite injury upon its caster. There's so much fuckery going on at work? I don't doubt that. It was enough to burn up the nerves that were acting as a barrel. Dizzy, we're gonna shoot the moon. Also, you missed your namesake. The imaginary heat had reached a terrifying temperature. Aoko trembled at its endless feeling, but would have to grin and bear lest their efforts come to naught. Aoko could no longer move. When she learned the Snark's true form from Sojiro, she gave up on any superiority a movable turret offered, instead opted to become a stationary cannon. I was walking back from my last break when you were talking about witch hair? Yes, but that's not what I was referring to. That was the only way she could reach it. It was impossible to hunt the Snark unless she anchored her crest at this location and angle. At the same time, this action revealed that she was out of options. Once the fuse was lit, she would have no choice but to fight to the bitter end. Aoko took a deep breath. This is the way she wanted it. Her preparations were complete. She would be able to deliver this maelstrom of magical energy directly to the moon, like a rocket payload. The third mid-air layer served as the cannon's muzzle and sight. It would fire the magical energy once it reached criticality, and it allowed Aoko to adjust the angle of fire. The moon became warped within her scope. As Aoko charged her magical energy, the ploy displayed its golden form as if to mock her. Come, worship the heavens, powerless sign of the innocent bloodline. For there it was, a point among the otherworldly sky, a mystical visage, obfuscated by jade mist and azure clouds. Called by the greatest treasure known to the world of magecraft, a rarity more valuable than the entire kingdom, crowned phantasm. Dead apart from the first, the world's greatest fabrication. Not yet. Oh. Her instinct screamed at her to delay no further. This fairy tale monster was the greatest of its kind, and it was about to expose its true form. Its open hostility made it clear that it was ready to counterattack. He had to shoot it down first. Magical energy was at 80%, the formula was operating normally, and all that was left was to pull the trigger, but the calm voice inside her head asked if it was really okay. She had one shot at this, and there was no going back. It was a battle of precision with no room for miscalculations, even if a tenth of a second of hesitation would tip the scales. Was she ready for the pain? Was she ready to deal with the fallout if she missed? Could she really even take down the moon from such a tiny bullet in the first place? Her eyes fixed upon the moon were filled with determination. She knew that the moment she fired, intense recoil would overwhelm her entire body. Still, she shouted. With every ounce of spirit she possessed, she fired an ultra-long-range projectile into the sky. This situation feels familiar. Are you talking about the Kamehameha that destroyed the moon? Yes, it does seem very familiar, doesn't it? The third layer embraced the magic bullet fired from the surface of the earth. What Whis is referencing is in Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball, where Roshi, in order to stop Goku from transforming into a giant fucking ape, he destroyed the moon by firing a Kamehameha at it. You would know this if you watched the original Dragon Ball or hung out with us in the Anime Club, which is a link to the Discord is in the description down below. Also, while you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe. No Eggman destroying the fucking moon in Sonic Adventure 2? That too! The crest and extension, which you would know if you looked at the archive of me playing Sonic Adventure 2. Link to that is also in the description down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe. The crest and the crest and extension of Oko's self unleashed light to pierce the moon. However, an enormous blue canopy pulverized the beam. It returned the ether, the 3,000-degree flame, to nothing as it came in contact with the bullet. The recoil of the Grand Magecraft literally boiled her blood. Her body couldn't handle it. Her heart stopped. Her brain went numb from the pain and impact. Her nerves... Putrefied? Because that's not petrified. Putrefied from end to end. But her magic crest revived them all by force. Even though her vision had gone white, she could still see it. Swallowing the blood in her mouth, Oko looked up with a scowl. There it was. An enormous shield of ice and sneering, deformed skull. There was no time to think or hesitate. I was just thinking, fine, I'll fire a second one. The magical energy throughout the park began to gather. Chat, a second bullet has hit the moon. Oko knelt across from the tyrannical face of the moon. She intuited that the ice had yet to fully form, but Snark hadn't reached its full strength. Which is exactly why. By accelerating the spell, Oko damaged her own body. The burden of linking the formula to the Snark caused intense pain. All she could do was grit her teeth and endure it. All because... Oko had gotten a read on their relative strengths. Even if the volume of magical energy was identical, Snark's form, its mystic scale, was different and it was in a different league. Oko could charge her energy to the absolute limit. That would barely make a dent in the ice wall. Meanwhile, there was nothing she could do to prevent her own annihilation if Snark gathered as much energy as it could. She loaded her next shot. She issued orders from the floating third layer. Ignoring the toll on her body, she began to accelerate the first layer formula. The wall of her right hand single layer was to absorb and store surrounding magical energy. The thick fog drifted through the park was an ancient ether spewed out by Flat Snark's own body, but Oko could pour into her own formula. Oko's body, which had integrated with the formula, took an amount of magical energy that far surpassed its maximum capacity. It seethed in gathering, or rather it trembled in the light. For a mage, magic energy was a propellant to reach the realm of mystics, the expansion of internal time, the liquefaction of the self, the release from the physical. They were all what one might call a near-death experience. On the precipice of what lay beyond, Oko stood firm and faced reality. Still, reality had come to break her will. The gap between them was as plain as any observer. The gun barrel named Oko Ozaki had not a chance to chip away that lump of ice. She accelerated the spell further. The skull grinned. That ice was no shield. It was a hammer to crush mages who did not know their place. The moon laughed as it prepared to crush not just Ooko, but the boy atop the roller coaster, as well as the park in its entirety. Her secrets were on the verge of going critical. Charged with the scorching power supply from her fingertips to her eyeballs, she would see the bullet fired. She would arrange the magecraft formula as quickly as her nearest transmission speed would allow. A single attack was not enough. There was no way to shoot her from this flank, which meant there was only one solution: fire through it. Or she gonna fire around it? The third layer began to transform. It switched from direct to alternating current. The spell's supposed strong point was its ability to adjust trajectory mid-flight, but right now all she wanted was numbers. Something about a drill that would pierce the heavens, a bullet that would pierce the heavens. A blue sun shined down upon the amusement park. Beams of light at maximum output streaked forth to pierce the golden moon. Holding down the trigger, she continued to fire, taking in energy ad infinitum. Blue flame shot forth at critical level, but the ice would neither melt nor mar. No amount of sheer heat could make the dead in something formed from such a colossal amount of magical energy. The toll on the circus sent them berserk, and blood began to run free. The battle had become a tussle of the magical energy that filled the park. From the very beginning, this had been the Snark's home turf. The Snark had control over at least 80% of the space, while Ooko had 20 at best. The castle of ice descends from as if to call the match. All she could do was delay the inevitable. She knew that she had been backed into a wall, and right now the only thing she could do was keep firing. Then again, perhaps not. There was another option. If she converted all of her magical energy into a defense, there was a tiny chance. No, not a tiny. A great possibility, in fact, that she could save just her. Clinging to that broken hub, Ooko continued to rotate her circuits. Time seemed to stop at the magical energy overdose. A second of intense pain lasted an eternity. Then it missed everything. Something approached one step at a time. Something from among the park's shadows. Something. She felt goosebumps from head to toe. The issue was no longer the ice overhead. In the midst of the stillness, the Red Death drew closer, step by ominous step. Her circuits in her mind began to rupture out of terror. The composition of her formula and soul began to rip apart. There it was, just behind her. Its footsteps came to a halt. It reached around and cupped her face in its blood-stained hands. She wanted to scream out with all her might. This is it. Nothing matters. I couldn't care less. Run or don't run, it doesn't matter. Quit hiding and reveal yourself. Use whatever you can and show no mercy. That was it. She had one final card to play. Once, a miracle had been gifted to her, almost as a joke. It made the ice look like a child's play. That was what the Red Death had come to kill. Using it would spell ruin. Not using it would mean death by ice. Then why hesitate? There was no conditions on its use. There was no price to pay for its power. She simply would cease to be herself. That was all. Humans love to exist in areas of gray. Dozens of electrical impulses disconnect in the brain every minute. Nothing lasts forever, not even oneself. It was not anything particularly worthy of disdain. It was not even anything remarkably worthy of being called taboo. What escaped her lips was what escaped her lips now was rage, bewilderment from the red silhouette. The girl let out an inaudible scream. Could true magic truly be her savior? What an opportunistic load of bull. After all, to begin with.
なのどうやって使えってのよ
Indeed, Aoka was still in the dark when it came to that magic, whatever it was. She woke up from a momentary hallucination. The very illusion of her breaking soul had shown her. Whining had had the opposite effect on her. Her pride was now ablaze.
逃げるのか
Tojo was right. Her opponent had put her in check, but she had done the same to it. It was clear why she was losing, so now all she needed was a counterplan, well within her abilities. No matter the odds, she was not the one to give up without giving it one last shot.
放り出すのはやれることを全部やってから
Her numbed fingers clenched into a tight fist. She was betting against the house, an unreasonable gamble that should have made her question her sanity. Man, this parlay is gonna be crazy. These odds are gonna be so nasty. Oh yeah! If her first step was off by an inch, her body would be instantly vaporized. But she knew a boy who never fled. She knew of a steadfast courage that could shine its light no matter how small, through any desperate situation. Yet, there was more than just herself to be concerned about. If that ice fell, it would mean the destruction of the park of its entirety. Everything he had achieved, everything he would risk and dared to happily put his life on the line for, would all be for naught.
本当それじゃあ何のために意地を張ったかわからない
Determination and confidence surged through her like electricity. She was in no mood to be crushed by a giant sheet of ice. If she was going to lose, she'd rather do it as the grandest firework possible. Aoka was a sore loser. At this point, she would rather burn herself to cinders than let it decide her end.
チェンジ
She grunted in pain. Energy raged through her body. Her circuits were on the verge of disintegration. Inscribed upon her body, her magic press was magecraft given physical form. It did not, however, stop to simply skin and flesh. It borrowed the very marrow on her bones. A playful smile graced her lips. Her sense of reason had been turned upside down by the pain. That was only natural.
なんだやればできるじゃない私
She had to praise her own body for holding out so long while she pushed beyond her limits. The Skullface noticed the abnormality. It finally recognized the challenge for dominance over the space. It laughed at the conceited face. Never did expect a magician to challenge the great flat snark, lord of vessels over a millennium, and in such an age of decline. She tried to catch her breath. She braced herself to the coming pain. She was going to smash that ice to pieces. Both had access to the same amount of magical energy. One of them was greatly outmatched, but
出力装置に差があった。魔力の吸引、方針の規模で負けているのなら、単純な話、私をでかくするだけでいい。チェンジ、ツアープラン。
The feedback would go beyond anything she'd experienced to date. Quite simply, her decision went beyond recklessness. She expanded both formula to maximum size. The first layer would transform into a giant vortex swallowing up the mist. The second layer would process it from one end and pump it into her in the barrel.
手が甘かった。撃ち落とすなんて半端もいいとこ。この場合、跡形もなく打ち砕くったら。
Primeval power answered the spellcaster's conviction. It formed the pattern of a writhing serpent. Voiceless magical power flew a banner of revolution. Now look upon the earth, O venerable one. See now this pioneer, the first among trailblazers. She embodies a species that knows no fear, that renders not all manner of mystic and tradition.
貸し借りはここまでよ。嘘つきブーチャム。お望み通り、のしをつけて返してあげる。
For the newest magician commands the principles of consumption and extinction. At a barren pool of light melted through the castle of ice. The barrel held fast. Her control of magical energy was divine. 100,000 miles of veins equal to 2.5 times the circumference of the earth hungrily drank the magical energy. The subsequent magical strike hurtled straight up at the moon. Death rose from the moon's surface. A cry of indignant terror echoed through the abandoned park. Reality was burned into the eyes of its creature of fantasy. To Oko, its vain struggle was the taste of victory. Victory despite her absolute reckless use of magical energy. The energy scales had been tipped to their breaking point, but nevertheless in her favor.
ツアープラン。ブラックライト、スターボー。一気に。
Nope. The skyscraper scattered into atomized dust. The island, its unattainable extolled and had swallowed hold of the... What? The island, its unattainable extolled, had swallowed hold of the despair of its many challengers. Long had it proudly eluded mankind's intellect. Yet now azure mist bemoaned its demise. In the sky, the icy canopy crumbled. The snark-hunted bullet jumped over the moon. Its throes of death sounded like the roaring sea reverberating across this fairy tale land. The battle was over. The thick fog dissipated and shattered ice melted away before it hit the ground. A lethal bullet unseated the Night King from its throne, affording him no time to grieve his loss. The oil of the moon. The untouched, flat snark. The dreamscape that had begun with its resurrection ended with its demise, drawing a close to the nightmare. That's not something you should say after destroying the moon. Flat on her back, Oko looked up at the night sky. She lay there perfectly still, not able to move a single finger. When she tried, her whole body screamed out in agony. She was completely empty of magical energy, and her magic crest had come to a halt. She estimated it would likely require a whole day to recover all of her bodily functions. Sadly, all she could do in that moment was take a breath. At least her chest was swollen with pride. She had gone toe-to-toe with the fairy tale monster that had emerged victorious. The battlefield conditions had favored her, it was true, but there was no denying that Aoko had come a long way in the last 6 months.
それはそれとして、アリスには謝っとかないと。プロイって壊したらそれっきりだものね。
Glassnark would never again return to this world. It was an insanely rare item, so invaluable that it would have been impossible to price it at an auction at the association in London. Aoko had sent Alice's priceless treasure to oblivion. Needless to say, things had gotten more than a little out of hand.
まあ、
They both agreed to the fight, so Alice probably wouldn't complain. Even if she was furious, she would never be so undignified as to show it. The second Aoko relaxed, her fatigue finally caught up with her. She did everything in her power to fight off the overwhelming drowsiness. Aside from a few minor internal injuries, what do you mean minor internal? I don't think there is such a thing as a few minor internal injuries. I think you have an internal injury, you're fucked. Her body was miraculously unscathed. She felt like she could probably stand up and dust herself off after a bit of rest. The golden moon continued to burn down in the night sky.
正体は油だものね。そりゃいつまでも燃え。
Aoko's blear eyes went wide in astonishment. She was unable to lift a finger.
スナークを見つけたベイカーも最後は一緒に消えるんだっけ？
It's just some minor internal bleeding. Yeah, fucking... She sighed in resignation. Aoko accepted that her final stand left her with only 10 seconds before she burned to ash too. Elsewhere, just a short moment prior, buffeted by strong winds atop the roller coaster, Soichiro gravely peered down at the ground.
Mumu?
All he could muster was a single murmur. I don't want to be at work. I bet you fucking don't. I want to be home. Go home. You surely have vacation days. I want to be happy. Surely you have vacation days. Did you know you have vacation days? What's so bad about internal bleeding? It's on the inside where the blood should be. Also, Rocket Pal, you just missed Roshi firing a Kamehameha at the moon. You can see Aoko on the top of some drawing on the ground and...
なんだあれ。いくらなんでも頑丈すぎないか。
In the distance, there was something familiar in the direction of the ruined house of mirrors. Sojiro's job, to throw Aoko's hair from the great height, was complete. While not the most impressive of tasks, it was absolutely a matter of life or death. And to top it all off, just thinking about how he was going to get back down to the ground was making him dizzy. Wait, are anime nights not on Mondays anymore? Of course they are. Wait, no, sorry. I just lied to you. Anime Club is on Sundays now. So, but what we're going to be doing after stream is that I think we're going to be watching either Dragon Ball or Yu-Gi-Oh! After the stream's over. So, I don't know, stick around.
いや、でも。
He was close to he stood atop the swaying bridge. A skull suddenly appeared in the sky above. On the ground, you could see a circling blue light with Oko Ozaki in the middle of it. And one more thing. From an angle that only Sojiro could see, a shadow stalked Aoko while she challenged the moon. It was shaped like a person, missing the lower half of its body. What the fuck? This thing is still alive? The disembodied torso slowly crawled its way toward Aoko. They're still over 600 feet apart. Unfortunately for Oka, she completely failed to notice it approaching from behind.
遠くて見えないけど、あれは
It had another stock? I fucking guess so. Shit. He was sure of what it was now. There was only one thing at the park that could chase Aoko and not him, the puppet.
いや、でも、ほら、あるいはひょっとしてただの偶然ではない。
So we're gonna use Humpty Dumpty to fucking destroy the puppet, right? His mind ran in circles. It was a perfectly reasonable reaction. Any grip on reality he might have had left was lost long ago when Oko fired beams of light at that monstrous moon. Oko's merciless fire buffeted the roller coaster like a storm. Just standing on it was almost enough for him to be thrown off and killed. At any rate, Sojiro couldn't fathom the situation. Should he head back to the entrance of the roller coaster and warn Oko about the incoming threat? No, there was no way he could make it in time, and to make matters worse, there was a horde of bread down there waiting for him. And it may very well have been the case that Oko was already aware of the puppet and would take it out as soon as he got close. If she was, Sojiro would sure he would be in the way. It did not seem that there was anything he could do to help. And beyond that, Oko was the only one in danger. He was quite in a predicament himself. You can't go home again. The road home was never as safe as one thought. It was as true here as it had been in the mountains. The path he was on was no exception. As risky as the ascent had been, it was even more dangerous to go back down. This is no time to be worrying about others. His shaking legs reminded him that he was only 200 feet separated from his
大
death.
丈夫。それは分かっている。
His head was pounding. This was reckless and stupid. Having been raised from the mountains, he was more sensitive to danger than anyone raised in the city, and just thinking about what he was about to do made his throat seize up. There was only one thing he could say for sure.
青崎のことだ。あれに絶対気づいていない。
With a sobbing shout, Sojiro started making his way down the 200-foot frame of the roller coaster, music going crazy. His race toward death accelerated. He never meant to speed up, but downward slope propelled him forward. It was too late for regrets now that he was running. He had no choice but to go even faster. Ro was sprinting down a roller coaster track. And time was not on his side. He would never make it in time if he took the long way down, never mind the breadmen crowding the exit of the roller coaster. With his exit blocked, the outcome would be the same whether he went slowly or quickly. There was no reason to rush to his death as desperately as he did. So what if it was futile? Sojiro cleared his doubts from his mind. He turned his attention to what he could do, keep his footing and try to arrive at the bottom as quickly as he could.
間違えるな。今大事なのは間に合うとか助けられるとか、そういう結果の話じゃなくて。
He had no idea what impulses were driving his stiff limbs. He just focused on the moment, pushing past fear and cold logic. At his core, he was the kind of person to deal with problems head on. There would be time to think about the consequences later. But hesitation was not his only
こんな
obstacle.
時に。
The worst possible hindrance appeared at the time when not focusing on the track would mean certain death. Sojiro sensed something wrong with the egg he had been so studiously observing out of one eye. Something had changed. At the very moment he realized it,
よそ見してる場合じゃない。
Sojiro stumbled, then instinctively caught himself. Instinctively. It was a miracle he had not fallen. Descending a roller coaster on foot was an act of suicide. The egg stayed right by his side, so close it was likely to collide with him. Though he was trying not to look at it, he could not help but feel uneasy that the door-like decoration in its center was gradually opening.
ああ、もうちくしょう。なんだってこんな。
He cursed his rotten situation, and yet he refused to slow down. He ran even faster, glaring at the egg on his side.
本当、おかしい。こんな状況なのに。なんで？
Sojiro was baffled to find that he was smiling. Perhaps it had something to do with Oko's charm. Sojiro could not tell one way or the other. He could still feel Oko's fingers on his skin. The trust and expectation she had placed in him was etched into his heart. But what spurred him on was something entirely different. This all stemmed from a much deeper problem. It was something inside him that he could not understand at the time, but eventually come to terms with one day.
よし、距離は今なら2メートル弱。
He carefully judged the distance as he ran down the track of death. But the distance between what? That went without saying. It was the distance between himself and the one thing that could save his life. He told himself he was going to do it, over and over like a mantra. Sojiro could not believe in himself. What he was about to do was incredibly stupid. But what is stupid when smart is not an option?
本当、なんでそこまでやるんだ。
Amidst it all, he laughed at how pointless self-reflection was now. Temporary confusion, a psychological thrill ride, both had laid his soul bare. What really mattered in life? The answer to the question was simple. His primitive values did not carve success or reward. All he wanted was
よし、
to live the way he wanted. It wasn't an obligation to the people around him. His desire to live his way was his and his alone.
行こう。
If the egg had been equipped with the vocal function, it would have gasped in shock at what happened next. The boy, who had only tried to escape up until this point, suddenly shifted his weight. He pointed his feet outward instead of inward. On the edge of the rail, he crouched over ever so slightly to maintain momentum and gazed at the floating egg.
やれる。距離的に問題はない。
He soared through the night sky. It was a flight that lasted mere 1.5 seconds, a cordless bungee jump from 100 feet above ground. His destination? The only thing that would stop his fall, the giant flying egg. He shrieked, this time out of elation, as he desperately clung to the egg's surface. Just earlier, the cold-blooded witch had told him that without fear, the top of the building would feel no different than a balance beam. This from the same witch that had been left speechless had she witnessed this spectacle. This is the one thing to be fearless. There's one thing to be fearless and another to be reckless. What the boy did next would give her a headache in the days to come.
頼むぞ、頼む。
Clinging to the egg, he shifted his gaze away from it. He felt the rapid descent. Sojiro, focusing his half-shut eyes on the ground, leapt off the egg once they were a few feet from the ground, and then turned back to it carefully to reestablish eye contact. Something so unbelievable, though, to Sojiro, the elevator at the department store and the mysterious floating egg were both just moving objects, virtually indistinguishable from one another.
よし、割れてない。食べ物を粗末にするのは良くないと思う。
He landed near the plaza. The shortcut had almost cost him his life. The shortcut that had almost cost him his life had paid off. Sojiro took off running the second his feet touched the ground. That puppet after Aoka was the only thing in his mind. He paid no mind to the moonlight in the sky. No, the egg, which was furious about to be being used and seconds away from self-destructing and blasting fragments all over the place.
青崎。
Nanu?
Aoko's dumbfounded expression spurred Sojiro on. The curse was complete. The egg began to sing its warning and to let them know there was no escape. Shrapnel from the egg exploded through the air. The ode to Queen Alice. That Alice had engraved into Dumpy quickly rocked him to the senses.
それはそれとして。
He snapped back to the task at hand and ran to Aoko, still lying on the ground. His legs moved as if they had a mind of their own. Though he couldn't have stopped them anyway, since he could no longer feel them.
お前、驚くほどしつこいぞ。
Get scrambled, idiot. The scrambled murder case. Piles of rubble became flowers of the light blooming up from the earth. The final curtain drew closer and the defeated left the battleground. Had Alice Koenji seen it happen, she would have been beside herself. The two had escaped by a hair's breadth. The only person in position to witness that rare mutual destruction was the girl who had been saved from it. The boy who had never stopped running paid it no mind. The safety of the girl in his arms meant infinitely more to him than the miraculous way in which he had saved her. The moon did not wait for the dawn to set. The ornamental texture of the fairy tale kingdom faded away. All the illusions returned to the way they were before. From the ostentatious chords reverberating through the streets, to the puppets welcoming their guests. Peace and quiet reigned once more, over a forgotten kingdom, never to be awakened again. Out flickered the embers of a late-night dream, even the electric lamps that illuminated the park. Together they watched it disappear. Sojiro lay on the ground, desperately gasping for air like a fish out of water. The curse of the exploding egg had numbed its pain, and he was understandably exhausted after all he had experienced. He looked like he could be blown away by the lightest of breezes. While Aoko was also exhausted, she was still in better shape. Focused on taking deep, even breaths, she was already working to recover her strength. She addressed Sojiro indifferently as her gaze remained on the amusement park. The abruptness of it all was a bit theatrical in nature. She wanted to look at him as she spoke, but her pride was simply too great. The moment she had accepted death had seemed like an eternity. She was beside herself in shock at how indifferent she was as the shards rained down from the moon. But a reassuring voice had snapped her back to reality. Why did he do it? What was he thinking? What moronic things had he done to pull it off? She had no answers for these questions, lying on the ground as she was. All she knew was that he had more than made up for his failure in the House of Mirrors, and then some. In those fateful final moments, she addressed him, hoping to find answers, but found herself unable to probe any further. To dig any deeper would feel like defeat, which is why it was so unlike her to ask him in the first place. Luckily for her, Sojiro had neither the capacity nor sensitivity to understand how egocentric she was being. Stuttered between the labored breaths. It was taking him so much effort just to breathe that he could not address her properly. She watched him right at the corner of her eye. Thinking back on it, the boy had performed the same role each time. Each and every time, he did what he could in spite of his fecklessness. It was far more admirable than nearly her It was far more admirable than her nearly suicidal tactics, even if she did defeat her opponent. He did not even recognize how extraordinary his last act of courage was.
提案。あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことを見逃してくれる？
At the very least, he had the courage to keep trying whatever he could. A spectator might have viewed him as a supporting actor. His actions were not exactly memorable. But the lead actress he supported did not see it that way. Such inspired actions were wasting in his supporting role. This guy really pulled off the impossible. It was so amazing that she wanted to shout it out as loud as she possibly could for all the world to hear.
Aozaki?
人畜無害もどうすぎると侮れないわ。
All Aoko could do was sigh. How could she not? Even she was forced to admit that the way he'd snatched her from the jaws of death was dashing.
ま、評価甘めだけど。
Truth be told, it was a lunatic for... reading is so hard! Truth be told, he was a lunatic for doing what he did. She steadied her breath. She steadied her breathing and composed herself. While she was in bad shape, she still had her pride as a mage to consider. That was why she felt the need to maintain an air of dignity.
しずきくん、見逃すのは今日だけって話だったけど、あれ、なしでいいわ。とりあえず、命は助けてあげるから。
She had hastily extended her right hand. It was either to shake his or to help him up. However, or farming even after they almost died. Well, she's got her pride as a mage to consider. Can't look like a little weak bitch. You know what I'm saying? She just fired a laser at the moon and destroyed it. Gotta aura farm a little bit. Sojiro did not take her hand, but instead stood up on his own. This night, despite the sheer insanity that he just experienced, his face did not once look as incredulous as it did now.
何そのリアクションは。
She stammered, worried that she had deeply embarrassed herself. Sojiro's gaze was fixed upon Aoko. A problem had dawned on Aoko. Though she normally hated being stared at, this time she did not mind. Rather, she was enjoying the warmth of his eyes and felt like it was something she could almost come to appreciate. Don't you get it? This isn't just about friendship, and I didn't mean like he only likes you either. Believe me when I say that Sonoji really... The conversation came rushing back. It was a memory better left forgot.
いかん、それは違う。
Pushing Tobimaru's words out of her mind, Aoko turned to Sojiro.
それとこれは別だから。私はあんたのこととか、ほんとどうでもいいんだから。
Oh, look, she's a tsundere. Puzzled, Sojiro tilted his head.
さっき嫌いだって言われたけど。
He responded matter-of-factly to her sudden declaration. She certainly had pointed that out, and to his face no less. It had a mere figure of speech that he was not meant to take literally, but now was not the time to belabor that point.
そうじゃなくて、あなたが私に惚れてても期待しないでって言ってるの。
Yet belabor she did anyway. Aoko blushed slightly, realizing how inane she was being. She wondered how she ended up in this position. And yet, she knew that she had to get this off her chest. All that was left was to politely wait for his response. I can't date you. Such heartbreakingly painful words were too much for a simple boy to hear. His shoulders slumped as if the world was coming to an end, or so Aoko had imagined. On the contrary, Sojiro was sitting there in deep thought.
俺が青崎に惚れてるって？
Sojiro murmured the words as if they were a magic spell. She shot right back with affirmation. After a moment of deep contemplation, the boy turned to an expectant girl and said,
なんで？
He had to be joking. But he was not. He was completely serious. He liked her, but he didn't like her. Of course, the vice president had jumped to conclusions. The boy had no interest in romance. He probably didn't even know what that was. She was incredibly embarrassed by how confused Sojiro still appeared to be. Her rosy complexion spread through her entire body.
もう一度聞くけど、なんで？
そりゃ、こっちが聞きたいわよ。
Damn.
飛び丸の大バカ野郎。
Just like that, she had lost her cool and given into an unjustifiable outburst. It was time to seal off the area and destroy all the evidence. Aoko's embarrassment devolved into sheer panic, and her grudge against Tobimaru suddenly manifested as a criminal assault. She lashed out with a punch that could have taken down a bird mid-flight. More specifically, it was a brutal right hook. Aoko blinked. Her blow had connected with something solid, snapping her out of her reverie. Her temper had lashed out at the complete defenseless Sojiro. It had been a splendid blow with all her weight behind it, knocking him out cold. Sojiro groaned, crumpling to the ground. Her punch finished the job that the curse had started. If not for discomfort on his face, he appeared to almost be sleeping. Alko convinced herself that he was napping, not concussed. And after all that, he fucking died. The tension in her shoulders eased away as she looked down at Sojiro. A ton had gotten in her way over the course of today, but the day was saved, for now. With nobody left to butt heads, she felt the exhaustion finally overtake her. Her fatigue was enough to make her complain out loud. When she thought about it, she realized this was the first time she'd used up all her magical energy and the first time she had participated in a battle of this scale with any prior preparation. Though in truth, she felt somewhat proud as she whispered those words. Normally it would be something that she would beat herself up over, but instead she simply shrugged her shoulders with a bitter smile. After all, it was thanks to the person sleeping by her side. As if the night had swallowed her voice before it reached him, she received no response. Confident, she continued in an even quieter voice. Of course, there was no response from Sojiro, and she was not expecting one. Saying it for the record shoot was enough. Falco watched as Sojiro slept for a while and then pulled something out of her pocket. It was the palm-sized glass bottle her roommate had given her, which she had opened with the pop. Leaving behind words colder than the winter chill at night, she called out his name. She barely sensed the bottle moving. As the silhouette of the fallen boy appeared to blur, she got the feeling that the weight of the bottle had increased slightly. What appeared to be a human form could clearly be seen inside the glass. As Koenji's tools were mystics that confounded even the most knowledgeable of mages. As soon as Oko tried to analyze them with logic or reason, she was already out of her depth. Knowing this all too well, Oko closed the bottle and watched the boy disappear as if by some magic trick. It was literally by a magic trick. That's what I just said. She wondered as she looked into the magical bottle. Its weight had not changed significantly, and she had no idea how it worked, but the one thing she did know was that there was a human being inside of it. The light weight was almost unnerving, closer to empty air than a human being. It was about as heavy as one would expect if they bottled up a summer breeze. Though, that did fit her image of Sojiro perfectly. Unrelated, but it seems that they unveiled the VA English dub for the members of Team Tactics actors and actress for Digimon Beat Break. Fair enough. Anyone we know, or? She muttered to no one in particular as she recalled the past. Falco wore a bittersweet smile. Her usual moodiness was gone. It was a dangerous world out there. It was good to have someone to keep her on her toes. With a wry chuckle, she flicked the magical bottle with her finger and set off walking. She could hear a bell in the distance signaling the end of the play. An ephemeral dream gave way to a reality. The grand scheme of things, it had been but an instant. As the actors exited stage left, the last of the lights silently flickered out. And so, the long-dead amusement park played its final role as a memory for a boy and a girl. Alright, well, I guess we're gonna end that there. What do you think, chat? Give me some opinions. That was the end of it? That's not the end of the game, but that was the end of that scene. The lights were pretty. I legitimately thought that was the ending. Oh no, we still have a lot of questions. For one, Aoko's hair still needs to turn red. there's got to be some kind of consequences for her using true magic and what that means. And we still don't know who sent the puppets. There's a lot of questions here. I'm just asking you guys' opinions on that chapter. Shenanigan magic go cuckoo crazy. I mean, that's not really an opinion. It's kind of a summary. It's kind of a summary of what happened. Yeah. Shit that didn't make sense happened. And then it didn't. And then it was over. That doll looks sick. It did look cool, but I don't fuck with it. I did like the fucking domain expansion though. That shit was cool. All right. The plan now is you guys get to decide if you guys want Yu-Gi-Oh or Dragon Ball. And I will see you guys in about 30 minutes when we continue doing one of those things in the Discord. We're not rating out to anybody because obviously we're doing the thing. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll see you guys maybe Monday. I don't know. Pay attention to the Discord. All right. Later.